So today we just want to talk about how, hear from the venture capitalists on what is the new digital age of the Middle East and the GCC, and then what business industries we're looking to invest in, and what is the future of the VC in the region. So to kick it off, the first question I want to pose is, are there certain new verticals that are very interesting in the Middle East, and what is of particular interest to yourselves?
Shall I start?
Yeah, sure.
So at MEVP, we're a private-based VC venture tech fund. We are investing only in technology companies across the region. Across the years, we've seen some evolution in terms of sectors. And we've started with e-commerce and content, and then moved to others like streaming, marketplaces. What are the new trends now we're seeing is obviously a lot of blockchain startups, although nothing, in my opinion, has materialized on a MENA level. Another area is groceries. We have just announced an investment in Saudi Arabia in online groceries. It's a very tricky vertical in e-commerce. However, we're very excited about it. These are two areas we are looking at.
Sure, Nawaf, being from Oman, what are you seeing the trend?
Well, what we're particularly focused on right now is we're super excited about energy and logistics and deep tech for energy and logistics. We have a partnership with Spark Labs, launched an accelerator program that's focused on that. We're partnered with the state-owned energy company there. But then also for that's open globally, and we're looking global, not just for the region, but in the region, we're pretty excited as well about logistics companies, IoT, deep tech. We think it's not very crowded right now, both from the investor side and from the startup side. So
it is very early days.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Trey, from Saudi Arabia, what are we looking? What is of interest there?
Yeah, so it's definitely tech heavy, and one message that I have today is just congratulations to the ecosystem, because the deal flow has not only increased, but it's gotten better. It's heavy into tech. We're mostly opportunistic, where we're looking for the right management team, a good idea, and 70–80% of the stuff is loosely defined tech that we see. We have not done anything in blockchain yet, but we're seeing those same business plans, and hopefully we'll get there soon. A little bit in IoT, obviously e-commerce and marketplace, and AI. We just haven't seen a ton of deal flow there yet, but we're making progress as a region, and I'm happy with the quality coming through.
I mean, it's interesting. We talk about IoT. Obviously, that's my background. We look at Saudi Aramco as a major oil conglomerate. What is the ability for Industry 4.0, for example, and how is that shaping in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's definitely a push. The suppliers to Aramco, I know Emerson has a big unit, and they're collaborating with Saudi Aramco. And Saudi Aramco itself is also looking at Industrial Revolution 4.0. As a side job to my investment job, we are teaching a professional certification in innovation class to Aramco employees to tackle just that for IRR opportunities.
Sure. Nawaf.
Hey. Basically, in Tenmu, we invest in Bahraini startups, so we're a bit limited to the Bahraini market. But we're sector agnostic, so we're looking at investments in all the fields. However, definitely in tech. Maybe we want to venture in companies or startups that didn't get the funding from other accelerators or other VCs. Hopefully, we are changing our platform this year and our model, and we can reach a bigger audience.
So talking about funding, it's a good segue. What are the challenges that we're facing in the VC world in terms of getting access to new capital to drive into these ecosystems?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Can I? Yeah. Sure. Basically, what we see in Bahrain, because our market is in Bahrain and we're focusing in Bahrain, I think we need more funding for startups. We in Tenmu, we fund seed stage startups. However, we're looking, we see that there is a gap in the market for funding startups in Bahrain. There are gaps in pre-seed, seed, and also in later stages. So funding is an issue. What we're developing in Tenmu is that since there is a gap in funding, we're here to create angels in the market. So we're developing a program with Temkeen, and in this program, it's basically an investors education program, educating family offices and the third generations in the family offices to invest in startups, and then matchmaking them with the startups. So, yeah, we need these family offices and individuals in Bahrain to come and fund startups, and that's where we're at.
Are we seeing change?
We are definitely, but we need more.
Yeah, we'll go down the line this way.
Let's do
So
that.
I was telling someone over lunch today that 6 years ago it felt almost awkward that the investors had a competitive advantage because there were only a handful of people investing in this region. And having been an entrepreneur before, I didn't feel like that was always fair, being mindful of people like MEVP. We weren't being egregious with valuations. We generally treated entrepreneurs fairly. But if you look at the reports from the aggregators like Magnet, the amount of investors has quadrupled in the last couple of years, and there's people that I don't even know, investing the same way FaZe is now, and they're a relatively new group. So the awareness is happening. Success breeds success. A couple of exits that we've had have popped more people into this market. Family offices are starting to get involved, but I would agree with Nawaf that we need more. There's not enough.
Sure.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that, especially on the family office note. You're definitely seeing the younger generations, or the second or third generation of these family offices being interested in the space. But there's definitely still the networks and the education that needs to come around it is still not there. We could definitely use as well with some independent, more independent VC firms, non-family office, non-government. That I think we could definitely use that across the GCC.
Sure.
Yeah, I think overall in the region there isn't enough money. I mean, I agree that the amount has increased and there's a lot of investors, a lot of activity. There's some corporate VCs, there are some government-backed VCs, government-backed programs, which is great, but we're still nowhere near where we should be in terms of amount of capital in the system, because the opportunity is great across the MENA plus Turkey region, but there isn't just enough capital. We've been fundraising for a year and a half, and we announced a fund recently, and we know how hard it is for venture capitalists like us who've been in the market for 9 years to raise. So I understand, I can only imagine how it is, how hard it is for other venture capitalists and angel networks and to fundraise, which only propagates the issue down to the startups and at the seed level, at the growth level. So I hope that more success come out of the ecosystem, so that money comes into the system so that we can grow. It's,
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned there's not enough money in the region, right?
For
it's pretty
tech.
funny, right? Considering,
For
but I think it's
VCs.
more about getting that money and actually trying to, put it to use, right, and put it to work. And I think that's something that we've done well internationally and generally, is putting capital to work. And I guess changing that educational side and getting people more involved at the family office level and changing their philosophies.
Yeah, money earmarked for technology investments in the region, for startups in Bahrain, Beirut, Dubai, Dammam, all these hubs of business. Unfortunately, the bigger players who have the capital potentially want to diversify away from the region. They want to diversify from certain sectors, geographically, etc. And in the past year and a half, what we've seen in terms of stability factors in the region have further worsened the situation for them, where they would say, okay, actually, you're great, and we understand that there is an opportunity to create technology disruption. However, we prefer to put our money in other markets just from a diversification point of view, and it has nothing to do with you or the technology sector. So
you're not making it personal.
Overall,
Right.
it's a de-risking environment right now. The founder level of the family offices are trying to de-risk, but then the second generation and the third generation are looking for more interesting opportunities for themselves. So you have this interesting dynamic. So they're willing to take risk on angel investments, perhaps, but when it comes to the family office level and the founder level of these family offices, their general investment mandate right now is kind of risk off rather than risk on. But I think as the space matures and as we do have more success stories, it will be seen as slightly less risky. It'll always be more risky than what they're trying to get at, but as we mature, it will de-risk.
Obviously, there are counterexamples like Al-Waha Fund here, who has this vision and who is investing in funds and actually invested in MEVP and other VCs, which is great. We need more of these initiatives, and we're very happy that Bahrain, for example, is leading some of these initiatives. We're creating a fund of funds for technology companies. This is amazing.
This is a really good point. Moving forward is like, I know why I moved back to Bahrain. You know, like, I moved back a couple of years ago, and I believe there's a lot of opportunity across the region. The question is, as a VC, why Bahrain? Why be present? Is it for the same reason that I came back, essentially, or what is the main reason?
For us, it's very simple. There is capital here. There is a willingness to do business in an efficient way. So it's good for people to start up here. And it's a market that is accessible from Saudi, from Dubai, even from India and Pakistan. So for us, Bahrain is a great launching pad. We've, over the past 3 years, actually, we've seen an increase, an improvement in the quality of the startups we see. Unfortunately, there are some realities on the ground, the size of the market, the availability of talent. However, there are other very positive attributes to that market which help us, which attracts us.
Sounds like the same reason why I wanted to come back. Yeah, right.
I think Bahrain is very special in this region due to the fact that, as you said, we're connected to Saudi, the biggest market in the region. However, even operating costs in Bahrain are really reasonable, and the lifestyle and the things that you can do in Bahrain. So maybe what we lack is talent in the market, in terms of tech, in terms of app development. We need more, but definitely Bahrain is a right place to start your business and then grow, because you have access to Saudi, the UAE, and then to the bigger MENA region.
I was talking to a startup, I guess late last week, and they were talking, they have offices in Bahrain and Dubai, and they were talking about shifting more employees and infrastructure to Dubai. And from a budgeting standpoint, they were saying it's a 35% increase.
Right. I thought it's up to 50% even. Yeah, it depends.
Right. And then coupled with, you know, the just progressive thinking here in this country, from a government standpoint, the EDB, they're doing a lot for startups. I said it 6 years ago, and I'll say it again now. There's never been a better time. You never will have any more people available, willing to help you with the infrastructure in the region and Bahrain specifically.
So moving on, I'll skip you, right? I'll skip you, no off. But so the question is, like, another question is like, what is the outlook on VC in the next 3 to 5 years?
We believe that we will see more and more capital being invested. I think the numbers by Magnet were in 2018, maybe 700 million was invested in startups, or maybe 600 something. We will see this number grow. I think a few exits that are in the works right now, perhaps Kareem and Uber or others, will really create a lot of excitement for the region. I think people will wake up and say, okay, you know, like, there is a big opportunity in big sectors like logistics, healthcare, retail. This is a big market. When you factor in the entire Arab world plus Turkey and even Pakistan and other, the numbers add up, right? So I think the future is bright for tech in general, and VC is one of the catalysts of this sector. So hopefully we'll make decent returns.
Sure. Yeah, I think 3 to 5 years, you're already starting to see, actually, not even 3 to 5 years, starting to see these big exits, getting people excited, some large, high-profile family offices getting involved in VC programs, creating a pipeline of really interesting companies. And you put that all together, I think the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a lot of excitement. But also, I think you're going to see it mature. You're going to see more VCs start to go sector-specific. People start to really think about deeper tech and not just the kind of marketplace and duplication of models that already exist. Also, I think you're going to start to see people innovating in deeper tech. And it'll be exciting over the next 5 years, I think.
I think even like at Brink, that's kind of where we kind of focus, is looking at IoT and even food coming soon. I think that's really, the future is being experts in these spaces.
Yeah.
I agree with Abdullah. And Riyadh, so the number of players is increasing. The dollar, real, or dinar amount is also increasing. A VC internationally, looks at 3 to 5 to 7 years for their investment, depending on where you're at. And this is still technically, I think, an emerging market. And the data that they have on exits here, it is a little bit on the longer end, 6 to 9 years. But if you look at 3 to 5 years from today, I think those exits are going to catch up, and you're going to see more action like that that's going to pull new money in. So I'm bullish on the market, and the opportunities are big.
Yeah. Noah?
I'm going to talk about our experience in Bahrain. Tenmu, 8 years ago, a group of investors, 16 investors, came together and made this fund. And then, alhamdulillah, like months ago, we've partially exited from one of our startups. So we made 20x, and 8 years ago, if you went to these investors and the family offices and asked them, what is your outlook? And they would be like, we want to see how it goes. But now, I think we need to replicate this model and have more angels in Bahrain, have more VCs in Bahrain, the support from the EDB and Temkeen and Bahrain Development Bank and other entities in Bahrain, accelerators or VCs, a part of the Arwaha Fund. So you have a community now. We need to make it bigger. And hopefully by Unbound, maybe 2020, you'll have a bigger and a brighter outlook to the future.
Sure.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, right? You were talking about angel investments. What are the major issues in angel investing in Bahrain or even regionally? And who should be leading the frontier on that? Because obviously it's an area that's kind of missing. There's we've got early stage and there's kind of the in-between that's just not there.
As I told you, it's very nascent. We need more angels. We need more funding to fund these startups. Tenmu can accommodate a few. However, what about the rest? You have accelerators that are graduating 6 or 7 startups every batch, and then what's next? Where are they going? And what about the pre-seed stage or the idea stage startups or founders? Who's giving them funding? So we need support. We need funding for all the stages, and hopefully with the support from the private sector mostly, and then the government sector, people need to understand that the future is this. So, and we have good case studies and success stories that can
I guess
vouch
again,
for these.
we're really waiting for something to surface, right? We need some good exits. We need some businesses with traction to drive that, to create awareness, and then drive angel investors out from hiding, essentially, right?
True.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think on the angel side, just going to echo exactly what he mentioned, and I think building networks across the region, just getting more people educated, more events like this, of course, we will bring people into the community and they get to learn what's happening and get them excited. But then, he raised a good point. You have a lot of these new programs, incubators, accelerators, focusing on, let's say, that seed stage, what happens beyond that. You have a few, government funds in each country. We have one or two major funds, government-backed, or each city has one or two. And that's where we, at Phase Ventures, we see a really interesting space to come in and, launch a follow-on growth fund right there and focus on energy and logistics again, double down on that sector and the stuff that we've learned over the last couple of years from that sector, from our partners, working with the government and working with Spark Labs. So that's what we think we can do to bridge that gap on the earlier stage and then on the later stage.
Is this something in Oman also that's being pushed by the government and is being encouraged?
I mean, across GCC, you got a lot of interesting programs happening, a lot of interesting initiatives by the governments. Each country has their different approach. We have two funds in Oman Technology Fund and IDEO, that are looking at this, a number of other programs, incubators, and government-led initiatives. We're kind of like the first private-led initiative in Oman. But we're not just looking at Oman, we're looking regionally, and we're also looking globally. Our focus is more sector-focused rather than geographic-focused. Sure. So yeah, that's what we think we can do to solve those problems.
A bright future.
Yeah.
Riyadh.
When we started, like I said, 8-9 years ago, we used to have to even sometimes seed the companies and do like angel investing from the fund, because there wasn't this initial starting up capital. For example, Angami, which is the biggest streaming platform in the region with 30 million, actually 80 million plus downloads, we seeded them at the idea stage as a venture capital fund, which is something we no longer have to do, because thankfully there are angel networks, there are angel investors. In Dubai there's 3, in Beirut a couple, and probably here there's 10 more, 1. So the good news is there are more and more angel investors. There are people who normal people who want to put $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 dollars in their friend's idea, because they see that this can be done here. It wasn't the case a few years ago. So that's exciting. At the same time, I think for startups, the challenge is to actually find these angel investors and people who believe in that idea and give you the initial money, but also the capital you need when you have an MVP, right?
Yeah.
Because that's very challenging. What we know from as a fund, what we've noticed is that a lot of the startups that graduate from the different accelerators and incubators, there's this valley of death that we call, right. Because they go to VCs and like they don't have customers typically, or revenues, or enough users, but they need money. They have a team now. They've committed their time for this. This is the hardest part, and I think hopefully there'll be more and more investors willing to fill that gap. So yeah.
We've got 5 minutes left. I have a couple more questions. So really, a really important one is, what are your thoughts on VCs and management fees and versus performance fees, and your emphasis, and what is the operational model of the future?
So for us, this is a standard model that has been used everywhere. It's been designed and vetted. We do like a small 2% management fee and a carry, right? So we share the profit. It's a combination. Unfortunately, the returns will, like was said, the returns won't come until 8 years and 10 years. So you need the capital to manage the fund. And it's typical, and it's used in other private equity other than venture capital. So The future could be crowd investing or ICOs, but for now, I think venture capital has will stick around.
It's set, right?
Yeah, at least the model the way it is. You will see some variations like 2.5% or 3% or less than 2 and maybe more carry, but this is the model that has been working. And
right, but you don't see that management fee disappearing anytime soon.
No, right. I don't see it because frankly there's a lot of costs that we incur to find deals and invest in deals and support the startups and grow and wait, right? So others have.
Yeah, I mean at the classic 2 and 20, there's on the management fee of 2, there's not that much lower that you can go than 2 before you hit 0.
Right.
But there are interesting things that you can do over there. I mean, you know, we've experimented ourselves on that front, and you know, partnering potentially with CVCs, you know, programs being funded not from. So if you're talking about accelerator funds, or if you're talking about that, maybe having programs that are not directly funded through the investment fund, have them funded through other areas. If you're industry specific, maybe it's a platform for corporates to do R&D or find new technologies, and they may be willing to fund it from that side. So you can innovate a little bit, but obviously, again, at 2% on the management fee, you know, there's not that much room to go down from there, but you can. There's cool stuff you can do. And yeah, then longer term, as you mentioned, then there's some interesting stuff happening where, you know, the countries now are looking at making legal like crowdsourcing platforms and other venues for raising capital. Sure.
Mine's a corporate fund. So
right, we can skip you then, Trey. It's all right. No,
but something could disrupt this, but I don't think it's anytime soon.
Right.
Before I came here, you know, we were kind of first-time VC fund looking at true Series A stuff. We got cute with the first fund and went 1.5, 15, and raised 50 million, and then we went to 2 and 20 when we went to the next 100 million. So we broke in a little less, but you know, there's expenses associated with it, and if you're a quality VC where the top deals are finding you, there's value in that as well.
Sure. Nawaf?
Basically, our model is very different from the VCs. We're angels. Our fund is a closed fund. However, what we're doing and what we want to work on is to make it to a network where we connect investors and angels with the startups, and then we can be the middle person. So this is what we're looking at, and how can we generate revenue out of that and cover our costs. So maybe we want to be that network-based angel network in Bahrain rather than being a closed fund. So.
Right. I've got to wrap up now. We're pretty much finished for our time slot. I want to thank Nawaf, Trey, Abdullah, and Riyad for joining us and sharing their information. Thanks for your time, and I hope it was insightful. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Paul. Hello again. Still awake? So, innovation has long been thought of as something that only small, agile startups can produce. But whether this is the case or not, let's listen to the discussion moderated by Cameron Mirza. I'll leave you with him. You're welcome. Please, John. Very squeaky chairs.
Good afternoon, everyone. And we've had some fantastic session so far today, and I'm delighted that we're going to hopefully continue that theme with another fantastic session right now. But before we get into it, actually there's one thing. If we can start getting on the hashtag Unbound Bahrain and to get it trending. I've just been looking, and we need to get it moving a bit more. So if you can all get on the Twitter, that'd be great. I'd like to introduce my esteemed panel, and I'm delighted that we've got a stellar panel for this session. And I think we'll start with, to my left, we have Wasim Cardi from SAP, who is the manager of SAP Next Gen Lab. Focuses on global innovation with purpose, and it's a community with 3,700 universities and other parties based in Dubai and Geneva. Welcome. Then we have Eva Dimitriatis, who's the COO of C5 Accelerator, which is a venture capital company, London-based, focusing very much on impact investing and helping entrepreneurs realize their ambition. Welcome. Then we've got Sri Bevara, who is a award-winning author, and no less has had his current book be #1 in 5 different countries, and I'm delighted that I have a copy in my hand right now. So I would suggest that you all look to buy it after this. And very interestingly, started life as a street vendor. So we're looking forward to hearing about your experiences.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Maurizio Rossi, who is with us today from Venice, founder of H-Farm, which focuses on business transformation for corporates and education, driving innovation, currently employing 1,500 people, but soon to be 3,000. So really exciting there. So we've got a great cast here with us today, great panel, global panel members. So we're going to get straight into it, really. So I think that we spent a lot of today talking about entrepreneurship and startups, but let's not forget that the majority of people still work in the corporate environment, still work within state-owned enterprises, still work for multinationals. And with that in mind, if we think about 15 years ago, some of the organizations, in particular companies like Kodak, companies like Motorola, companies like Nokia, Blockbusters, don't exist anymore. Now, there's an argument to say that actually customer expectations have changed and they've actually fallen foul of that. But there's another argument to say that their lack of innovation has resulted in their demise. And those who have worked for large organizations, such as many people here today, probably understand that actually, you know, there's layers of bureaucracy, there's a challenge to be creative and to be innovative, to get ideas approved. The appetite for risk is traditionally quite low, and the innovation spirit can be crushed. I was very lucky last year to spend a couple of days with the author Geoffrey Moore, who wrote the book Zero to Win, Organizations to Win in the Age of Disruption. And there's no doubt that companies these days, no matter how big, need to be agile and be innovative in their approach, or else they run the risk of being left behind. So let me start with my guests today and just get a sense of what do we mean by innovation. So perhaps we can start with yourself. What do we actually mean by innovation?
Yeah. So we always think of innovation as if like you're really starting something from scratch, but it's really, even if it's like a baby steps into innovation to change a little bit the processes that you're doing, and that could change internally and externally, and that's why you need an ecosystem that could, and the mindset to start innovating from within. So for example, at SAP, we just had launched a 1 Billion Life initiative where we're encouraging employees to spend some of their time on an entrepreneurship project, and where we coach them, provide them with funding and space and the ecosystem to work on their project with had a purpose as well.
Okay. So if I then go to Maurizio at the other end of the spectrum, what do we mean by innovation?
So, in my opinion, innovation it's a very broad sense, the terms. So everyone has its own meaning because the terms of innovation range from evolution to revolution. I think that all this diversity has in common the fact of change. So everybody thinks and rely to innovation with something that's going to change. For someone, it's going to be more aggressive. Revolution for others is going to be just evolution. But that's today is the password that it's almost abused the word now.
Eva, just from your experience, you work for a VC company. Can you perhaps, you're in this innovation space. What do we really mean by it? I think there's a perception that we're talking about technology all the time, and it's all about this kind of like the next big thing. But what do we really mean by innovation?
Yeah, I mean, innovation does not have to mean technology. It does today because that is the easiest thing to scale. But innovation existed for centuries. Da Vinci was an innovator. Before working in VC space, I worked for a large auction house, which was older than the United States of America. And for a business that's 250 years old, innovating meant something very different. And it was iterative, as you were saying. It would be small steps to take us into a direction of pivot. I heard something recently which made me laugh, and I hope you'll enjoy this, but it to me sums up the mentality of an entrepreneur and an innovator. So it goes something like this. Dear pessimist, optimist, and realist, while you were debating about the glass of water, I drank it. Yours sincerely, the opportunist. And I think that's innovation. It's seeing opportunities and not wasting time muddling around, and this is where corporates can get a bit stuck, but actually daring to try it.
So, Shri, you started life as a street vendor. Today you're a best-selling author. Along the way, you must have taken a few risks. You must have been entrepreneurial. You must have been innovative. Can you shed some light on what your view of innovation is?
Yeah, my answer to this would be innovation is to understand what to focus on so that you can survive and sustain. This is the first thing. The second thing is innovation is also leadership. It's a very, very important thing because the culture or whatever that starts from the top down. So it is the leadership that can scare you, that can threaten you with what you cannot become or what you can become. And that is how you're pushed into this part of innovation. So it is a natural progression that happens. You can only connect when you look behind that you are innovated. You cannot innovate looking ahead.
So let's bring the conversation around to practicalities. We have a lot of organizations, big organizations, multinational state-owned enterprises. What should they be doing differently to become more innovative and to be more competitive in this super fast, turbocharged tech world? Maybe we start with yourself on this one, Wissam.
Yeah. So recently I've been advocating together with my team the science fiction thinking. And science fiction thinking is really an elastic way of thinking that goes beyond what's possible right now. And it's more to do with scenario-based planning, where you see where you're going to be in the future and then go back to the present. So it's like being on Earth, instead of seeing Earth like as a journey to Mars, thinking that I'm already on Mars and how I'm going to make it from Earth. So this kind of, if you activate the science fiction thinking, a lot of ideas could come in with the support of an ecosystem. And we all know that, whether it's rockets or helicopters or mobile phones, they were all inspired by science fiction. So I think science fiction thinking would be very important for corporates and startups.
So if we move beyond science fiction thinking and move to more kind of so companies are starting to, there's a trend emerging here. Eva, I'm going to look at you for this. There's a trend emerging. When you look at corporates, they're working with smaller, more agile, nimble, dynamic organizations, often startups. Based on what you do, can you give or cite an example of where we've seen a successful case of a corporate working with a startup?
I think there are a number of different models that corporates have employed, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows of at least one of them, but we've seen corporates have their own entrepreneurship programs where they actually encourage their own staff to be entrepreneurial. And some of them do that in a very structured way. So Google has this cool idea where they allow people to have a 20% project. So 20% of the time, they can work on something that's not their day job, and it has to be signed off, and they have to make a case for it. But if it works out, that could become a new business stream. AWS is quite similar. So that's sort of entrepreneurship within the realms of what you already do. Then we see the model where they set up their own in-house accelerators, like General Electric, many others. And then you see the model where they partner with someone externally, like in the case with C5 and many of the other accelerators represented here, where they say, look, we're not experts at this, and we don't want to stifle the possible innovation by subjecting it to our internal bureaucracy and red tape. So let's just support an external implementer to do this for us and let us have first access. And actually, I think SAP does incredibly well in that as well. In-house and outside, we work with SAP and S2 in the US. But in terms of an example, you know, I liked when you mentioned practicalities. You have to think about the mechanisms that make these things possible. And an example that springs to mind for me is Investec. So Investec is a South African bank originally, but their UK arm has set up a fintech fund. Makes absolute sense. They don't want to get left behind. They want to be able to see new innovation and technology. And what they do is they don't try to accelerate these companies, but they have a platform where they have the license and the mandate to effectively deploy a certain amount of capital that they know is going to be risky, they know it's going to be experimental, but they have a safe sandbox in which they can try out new technology. And so it's not a case of every time there's a cool idea, some guy in their 30s has to go through 17 rungs of management to get to a CEO to sign off £20,000 to deploy. It's already there, the infrastructure is set up, the license is there, and anything that is successful is upside. And so I think it's about making things frictionless and speedy, because startups have to be aware of this as well. If you lose too much time in trying to get through the hoops, you've lost the opportunity.
So, taking it on further, Maurizio, on this one, you've got a lot of experience in terms of business transformation, particularly in Europe. What are the things that you've seen corporates do to unleash this potential which sits within these multi-level organizations?
Well, I see the transformation, we can use this definition. It's the field where the corporations has to concentrate to innovate their business, their presence, and to drive their future agenda in Europe, but not just in Europe. I see the biggest, they should concentrate, and the biggest challenge in somehow what they should do, it's to be concentrated, to be aware about the impact of the culture. Because it's the technology and the next generation are the two elements. Talents, the new technology are the two elements that is redefining basically everything. So we can have on greenfield initiatives, and that's more about startup, who's coming with the venture capitalists. And the corporates, they can bring assets, they can bring market, they can bring an heritage, they can bring so many things, but there is a very solid wall, which is about culture in between all these outside-in flow that comes from talents at first, as individual talents, that sometimes they can be combined as a team and form a startup, or just as individual, because especially the new generation, which is tech-native generation, they have a different relationship with the technology. So this is the biggest element where the corporates that should concentrate to be successful in their process of transformation and going to drive, to be able to drive their future toward, because you just took the example of Kodak, and there is so many corporates in all industries, in all sectors, that are into the risk of Kodak Blockbuster, and just because they cannot move into this new culture. So this is always the point that is the success, it's there. If there's not a shift of culture in the organization from the board members and then to all the company, there's no possibility to succeed or at least to transform and keep the leadership.
So leadership is a really interesting word, and this brings me on to a specific question for you, Sheree, because your book, your best-selling book, Moment of Signal, is about the signals that can change your life and make you a better leader. So I'm asking this question for a friend. You're an innovative person, you've got great ideas, you've got aspirations, but the organization you're in is holding you back, not allowing you to elevate those ideas and fulfill the potential. What advice can you give that person? Again, I'm asking for a friend.
See, the answer to your question is, first is knowing the signal. The signal is knowing what is needed. Two is acting upon. Now somebody knows what is needed, what to be done. But if that is an individual, let us say a startup is an individual. You can compare a startup to an individual, where the startups are, they can quickly act upon, they can make a choice, and then run behind it. They're hungry. Whereas we cannot be very unfair to bigger organizations like Iva just mentioned about General Electric, SAP. You take JP Morgan Chase, Citibank. There is a Japanese company called Gumi, which is still running since 1567. Can you just imagine? What must have they done? So there are major organizations which are still available. If an organization is available for more than 30 years, that means they knew how to innovate in some or other manner. And that's how they are surviving here. And to the answer of your query, this is again, like Rosie mentioned, that it's again starts with the leadership. If the leadership, the top board really looking forward to innovate, do they want to survive for next 30 years, next 50 years? Can they look beyond and ahead? Can they stay ahead of the curve? This is when the culture begins and they start to encourage the intrapreneurship, wherein which they have blocks, the independent blocks they create, they invest upon. You cannot do your regular job and then you expect them to innovate. That's highly impossible. This is one of the major mistakes that is being done from the corporates, the major bulky corporates. But there are companies like AT&T, if I can take an example. 2009, it has started a unit called Pipeline, wherein which they have started encouraging people to come up with ideas. Per month, they received 5,000 ideas. And best ideas are being funded by the company itself. And then they have set up a foundries in different cities. Individuals are allocated some jobs wherein which they can create new products. So they are doing for the last 10 years, AT&T. And Waze is another example, the small startup example that I would like to take is from Israel startup that is. It is into maps, Google Maps. Google has purchased it, but on a condition that it will be left as an autonomous. For 1 billion, they have purchased it for 30% Waze. But it is now operating on an autonomous thing because Google, for example, Google X, they also wanted to innovate. So these are the things happening. Some corporates are understanding that they have to take the biggest risk, come out of their comfort zone, and then they can invest on the individuals who wanted to innovate. If not, they will only learn in future that they did not innovate.
That's great. And I mean, I think, I do see a trend now with organizations doing their own hackathons and doing sprints within the organizations to try and sort of create ideas and lead innovation. I'm going to ask a question to you, Maurizio, and then I'll come to you, Wissam, about the role of education in driving innovation within organizations. It's been mentioned earlier today, the triple helix of, universities playing an important role in terms of helping organizations. What, from your experience, a lot of experience in Europe of this going on, what examples of best practice have you seen in particular around education impacting within innovation in large organizations?
I believe the education, everything starts from education. So The education, it's broken. It's broken everywhere in the world. Because we have this new generation which is digital or tech native, and the education system starting from kids to, of course, the higher grades as university are not fitting correctly with the ecosystem of startup entrepreneurship. So there is several programs. We decided our own to take our program, and our program is very simple. Since our philosophy as a company, it's a human, so H stands for human, we decided to start from the kindergarten and then going up to 25 years old. Because of course, the higher grades at the university is like the last mile to connect with an ecosystem, because students are 20 years and more. So they are young men that they can provide, but it's all these come starting really from the early age. And I don't see also in Europe, there is not really a system to take as a model. We need to mix some humanities, creativity, and technology, because we have a lot of university. It's great for science, for technology, for IT, for whatever, but we also need the creativity, and we need all the thinking. So this is, the education should be much more a field to experiment. The accelerator for startups can be considered part of an education training program, because we need to coach the people to make mistake, to do things, to take risk, because the life is based on risk. The problem, we come from an education which was more, and also how the world was in the past 50 years, was to protect from the risk, try to create a world without mistakes, you know? And that's the biggest challenge that the corporation has it. They are so afraid to do a wrong move, and they don't move, which is the biggest mistake. So the education should be there, should be especially in the higher grades, the university. That's what we do. We involve them with events, with activity and staging, be part of what is build their future. It's a path. It's not you study one specific position and then you take it for your entire life, like was for my parents or for my generation. It's completely different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's about STEAM. We shouldn't forget the arts, liberal arts, social science is very important, not just STEM. I totally agree with starting with early age and you know, moving beyond the traditional structures. We should focus on multidisciplinary, moving beyond that to transdisciplinary. That's where the great innovation happens. And I think your last point about education systems being outdated is absolutely correct. And actually what education needs to do is live in the future and work in the future. So I think that's, you're absolutely right. I'll come to you in a second, Eva. Just pick up on this, on Wissam. What's your SAP heavily involved with education? What's your take on this?
Yeah. So again, if we go back, that the most important thing when it comes to innovation is the mindset. And this mindset should be influenced at a very young age. So in our community, we have more than 3,600 university and high school members, where we start at a very young age to teaching people about science fiction, about design thinking, about that it's okay to fail, right? Because I think that's what made Silicon Valley what it is today, is the culture acceptance of it's okay to fail, and then after a couple of failures, something will emerge and you'll be successful. So that's why we also open up labs, SAP NextGen labs at certain universities and colleges, and we invite our ecosystem of customers and partners to go there and co-innovate and crowdsource ideas from students.
Eva, you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to pick up something, and it's quite specific, but I think that what I'm seeing more of, particularly now in the UK, I think it's existed in the US for a long time, is universities playing more of a role in helping research and development spin out into commercial opportunities. And getting this right is involves quite a lot of finesse, because there's a question of IP, and a lot of universities try to sort of put a ring fence around anything that's developed on their grounds or within their PhD programs. But I think that's a really important way that universities can help. And You know, I was recently invited to judge some startup ideas that were being incubated at the university that I went to, and they're very far behind on how they approach and create awareness around entrepreneurship in that space. So I think there is more, and I think accelerators within universities are a good way to do that. But it's also about getting it right. You know, how much ownership do they have over it?
Sure. Look, I think you know, you're right about that, and I think we will see in this part of the world an increased focus on technology transfer offices or technology knowledge offices, where, you know, there will be this kind of co-creation and leading innovation. But you're right, I think there's a lot of work still to be done around IP law, which is still quite weak in many parts of the world. I'm going to try and wrap this up before I come to you all for your final reflections. We've had some really interesting conversations here around how corporates need to think and behave and act to drive innovation. And there's some themes that have emerged for me. One critical theme for me is leadership. I think there's something else around creating a spirit of innovation within the organization, and that's through you know, allowing people to work in a safe zone, to allow them to take risk, which is, you know, hard to do, but nevertheless an opportunity. Education is critical to help organizations move forward, and it definitely seems that corporates need to work with organizations, smaller organizations, startups, to infuse them with different thinking, give them different ideas, and even a different energy. And I include universities in that as well. So perhaps if I start here and we work our way down, just your final thoughts before we wrap up.
So I mean, as an advice for whether it's a big or small company, activate your science fiction thinking, your growth thinking, lead with purpose, think of how can you give back to the community linked to the 17 global goals, and then just build your ecosystem around it.
I'm glad you mentioned the global goals. So I believe very much in impact investing. And I think that the companies that are going to succeed in the future are those that think about the impact that they're having and how they can be sustainable. And I think all of us in this room would rather consume from a brand that cares about the world, the environment, and the human capital versus one that actively does not, assuming everything else is equal. So I think that's a big part of this innovation theme. And so my advice to corporates would be put together an active and willing task force around this, lower the barriers and the friction, give a mandate of can-do attitude, and try things out.
On a lighter side, innovation doesn't work with the time deadlines. Innovation needs the freedom.
Yeah.
But the jokes aside, change is at the heart of the innovation. We human beings are designed to have this consistency of the routine. We do not like the change because innovation comes with the first objective of the change, and that threatens. Why I'm trying to connect this to the leadership is leadership has to foster an environment wherein which there is freedom that is existing for people to freely come up with ideas, and then the budget and all. Many people get stabbed with the budget issue, but budget is not the first thing. You need to have that environment, and then comes the money part. And yes, we need to have that independence to have that innovative environment.
I think one, it's moving toward open company, because it's a great way to attract talents. So I don't find a better model of this. Taking risk, it's another great element, and not having fear about failing, and be very fast, because today it's one of the biggest problem is the velocity. So it's we're talking about a global stage, and startups can, at the same time, we are talking now, for sure there are several hundreds of new ideas who's starting, and some of them will be able to raise a lot of money, or some of companies can be able to move. So the competition, it's based on this, taking risk, be fast, and be open. So I don't see other elements.
Well, I'm sure you agree, it's been a really insightful discussion. I think our time's up. Just a couple of things before we ask you to thank our guests. First of all, Shree's book, I'm going to plug Amazon. I think they're sponsoring. So his book, Moment of Signal, is available online at amazon.com. And Eva's running the Windsor Half Marathon for charity. So if you go to Just Giving page, if you find a moment to do that, that'd be great, and contribute to a great cause. But only remains for me to ask you to thank our panel members, who I think, I'm sure you'll agree, have been superb. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, yeah, it's working. So, who loves storytelling? Anyone? You don't love storytelling? Okay. Anyway, every founder should know how to tell a story and to humanize the brand. So we're going to discuss that next on the panel, which Dina Shabib, the founder and CEO of Farahi, is going to moderate. I'll leave it with her.
Thank you very much, Aziza. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very excited to be here today. My name is Dina Shabib. I'm the founder and CEO of Farahi, the first online one-stop shop for bridal and wedding essentials with a focus on the GCC bride. I'm very excited to be here with this great panel of experts. And honestly, instead of me introducing you, I'd like you guys to just maybe take a minute and give a quick background about yourselves. Neda?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Neda Alawi. I'm the founder and creative director of Neda. Neda is a brand that transforms art into fashion accessories. And I think the reason I'm here today is actually we tell stories all the time within our brand. As a matter of fact, our products, each artwork would have its own story. So thank you for having me here.
Hello, everybody. مساء الخير جميعا. This is Ali Sabkar. I'm the global chairman of Social Media Club. Social Media Club is an NGO, a global NGO that gathers the professionals in social media together around the world to connect them and share lessons that they have learned through their, let's say, stories. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Qannati. I'm the head of brand marketing and corporate communications for Bahrain Islamic Bank. As you may know, Bahrain Islamic Bank is the first Islamic bank in Bahrain. We've gone through a huge transformation. I'm taking this opportunity to tell you how storytelling was part of this transformation.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ali Sayed. I run a digital marketing agency called MA Digital. We're 5 years old. It's a little baby and growing very well and strong thanks to our wonderful clients. We're based in Bahrain and we specialize in web, social, and branding. Thanks, Dina.
Thank you very much. So today we're here to talk about communicating ideas on various different platforms within the context of a story. So I'd like to start by just maybe directing it to all of you within your different industries and the different realms of what you work on. What is effective storytelling, in your opinion?
I'm going to tell you a little story to explain this point. So my background is oil and gas. It wasn't in luxury, it wasn't in retail, nothing of this sort. But I did it with my instinct and just a pure passion. But 2 years into the business, I decided that I'm going to back it up with some science, right? I need real information to back this up. So I went and studied in Paris, France, the business of fashion. And they kept repeating 2 words to me, and I almost was sick of them. You need to create a universe, you know. So they were all about this word universe, and in my head, what is universe? And the second word was segmentation, just in case you were curious, because segmentation is part of the universe. So universe is basically the story behind the story. What goes in the back of your story? What is it that you're insinuating or not saying it in front of people, but the personality of your brand does? So I think that's, to me, having the right universe or building the right universe for that brand and company, as I feel I did for Aneda, which is our brand. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you've ever entered our store and knowing our brand, I feel everything would come to you. And it's not a coincidence. It's because throughout the years, we were able to build certain feelings in your hearts or certain stories. And that's how I feel, you know, I think good storytelling is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me, the storytelling is all about how human is the story. Been doing a couple of campaigns through the last 20 years with my ex-companies. I was with Zain Bahrain as an e-marketing manager, and then I had my own agency. So we worked with a couple of brands, and the most successful campaigns was always about people in the campaigns, telling stories about themselves, you know, what they like to do, their ambitions, where they would like to go. That attracts people because at the end, everyone has a story, and all people are following the big brands because they want to know about them. They want to know more about the stories. You see today, the big brands, the big accounts are always the influencers, or let's say the players, musicians. They have the biggest followers. Like, you know, Ronaldo has the biggest thing, you know. So, so the campaigns that we did, even if you brought people are normal people and they start talking about their stories, what they do in life, it will also attract people and start people talking about it. So for me, storytelling is always about the people in the campaign itself.
Okay, very interesting.
I completely agree with both of those views. I would like to take a step back and just go to the very basics of what we studied in the university. We started with the 4 Ps, you know, the place, the promotion, the product, and this is how it used to be. The promotion used to be the story or the message, and then the point I'm trying to make is that the story is nothing but the message that flows back and forth between the brand, the company that you know, wants to communicate, and what the audience says back. I think I agree with Ali in a way that, I mean, you mentioned Ronaldo as an example. It's because Ronaldo told a story through actions, through words, through behaviors that made the audiences, you know, respond back. I'll just give you a quick example and how did storytelling evolved over the last, say, I don't know, 100 years. So when car was first invented, Ford introduced cars, and cars were just black. And people were like, wow, a car, yeah? So the story was, there is a car. And people ran and bought them. And then cars became different colors. And then the story was, now cars in different colors. And then it evolved and evolved, and then Volvo came and said, well, I have the safest car. Now all cars are safe. So I think the storytelling is going to be more complicated, more challenging. I guess at the end of the day, we need to hear what people want. So this, in my view, storytelling is of both dual communication.
Thank you, Mahmoud. And what is effective storytelling effectively is what we're talking about. In my view, I think it is getting someone to do something that they would otherwise not necessarily do. Whether it is subscribe to something, buy something, do something, whatever that may be, very broadly. And the question then begs itself, it is, how do you do that, and what toys, what tools, what channels do you have, what touch points do you have to move people along that journey? If I may answer the first one, in my view again, how do you get people to do something they wouldn't otherwise do? How do you effectively tell a story? To pick up on something that my esteemed colleague Neda said, she mentioned feelings. If you elicit an emotional response in someone, if you resonate with their emotions, considering that heart always wins over head, they may do something you want them to do, whatever that may be broadly. Subscribe to a cause, buy a product, join a mailing list, whatever it may be. Now, the tools that you have, what channels do you have at your employee to actually achieve that, are vast and very many. From the vantage point of a marketing agency that focuses on digital, we talk about those that give you the highest return on your investment. Now, no matter what seat you're sitting in, no matter whose shoes you wear, everybody seems to always want more subscribers, more customers, more people finding out about me, whether that's me, an individual, or a brand, or a cause, or whatever it may be. So the channels are vast and very many. It's about telling a consistent story across all of those channels that evolves, like my esteemed colleague Mahmoud has said, with that segment of one. It's not screaming on a rooftop and talking to everyone, rather it is marketing to a segment size of one. And framing that, not in terms of, this is what I have to give you, rather, this is what you will benefit from availing my blank. And obviously, the final gauge for whether or not it's effective is if you move them along that journey down the funnel to do what you want them to do.
Yes, definitely. To actually touch on the points that you mentioned, you were talking about the universe and it's about the people. How does all that come along when you are looking at certain channels such as social media channels that we have right now? I mean, maybe Snapchat, it gives more of room for actually a longer story, but you know, the short Instagram videos or just a quick post. How does storytelling come into place when you have a really short attention span, or just a really, few seconds to grasp your audience's interest and get them to do what you're trying to get them to do? So how does that play along?
So I don't think people have a short attention span, and I'll say why. Can I ask a question to the audience? Are you all with us, or did you snooze? So my question to you, how many of you binge watch a series on Netflix? Thank you. Does that say short attention span? Of course not. It means that you're dedicating, 13 hours on that day to finish that series, which means that we need engagement. We need to feel something. We need to, in order for us to want more, we need to feel. We need to relate, to be part of the story. So I think it's the pace of the information that's given to us. So if the story is very slow, we move on to another story, right? I think the minute Instagram introduced the story part, I personally, to me, Snapchat was exhausting, but Instagram story is easy. I can just get to it. I post. It's a snapshot of what I'm thinking. I just love it. I personally love it. Thank you for being honest, by the way, sorry.
I think the story is not only Instagram story or Snapchat. We have hundreds of social media channels.
Of course, of course.
There is one story today, which is there, the hashtag, Unbound Bahrain. Click on it, and we'll find thousands of stories from the speakers, from the participants, from the people now I saw them outside are networking. Yeah. The networking maybe is more important than a session, because they are making business. Mm-hmm. So all type of social media channels, all type of contents, tweets, text, videos, are stories as well. And you have to go through them. I'm not very much with having only one channel and using only a video for the story, but the story has to complete, I have to see you everywhere, wherever I search for that. Let's say the keywords or the brand. So if I go on Twitter, I see the same story that I have for your campaign, but maybe when I go to the story, which is the videos, I see behind the scenes. Every channel have different type of telling stories. So we need to study what to push on the Instagram stories and what to push on tweets and what to push on YouTube. because all of them are a media mix that they complete the full story.
It's true, and I guess that's one of the challenges, right, is making sure that your message is unified,
yes,
yet specialized in each channel.
I'm going to keep repeating myself. I agree with both of you.
Thank
because
you.
I do. I think, okay, let me shed light on a different aspect here. Is let's remember when Instagram was first introduced, and it was very pure, natural, people posting stuff. There were no ads, yeah, and then suddenly the ads came in with a lot of control, and then there was the control lessened and lessened and lessened. So now I think the point I'm trying to make is that the audiences are very aware of those things. They can easily identify and differentiate a story from a non-story. I would say that we as advertisers, we as clients, I'm not saying the agencies, we still fail to communicate an effective story. We say we are, but then it ends up becoming an ad and not a story. Because a story is not made of one page. When you open a story, there are so many pages. So you can't just suddenly open a story from page 50 and say, this is my story. You have to say the whole thing. And I think this is what, it's a challenge that we have to overcome.
I think in terms of attention spans is what we're talking about. It can be looked at as kind of like the chicken and the egg. In other words, are people's attention spans just naturally, through some phenomenon that's unexplained, getting shorter, which is why social channels, since we're talking about that, allow you to post shorter and shorter and shorter snapshots of your message? Or is it the other way around? Is this influencing social culture? Irrespective of which side of the fence you sit on, I'm going to be a little bit contrary to my colleague Mahmoud, and I'll say I disagree with one point you made, which is that banks and clients these days are doing an amazing job, actually, of telling stories effectively, because what you have to do is resist the urge to talk about every single thing you do, because people just switch off immediately. What happens is, and banks more than anyone, I think, these days are doing these, doing this incredibly well, is that little bite-sized snippets that are suitable for a 6-second Vine or whatever it may be second on any particular platform, not just social, but literally any platform, whether it's indoor, outdoor, above the line, below the line, you name it, are creating a sort of consistent message, one step at a time, about how that brand can help me. And that is the key to overcoming this, what seems like getting shorter and shorter and shorter attention span.
Completely agree. And when you're talking about the banks, maybe the banking industry in specific, especially here in Bahrain, you pass by billboards on every traffic light, and they're competing with each other, and it's big, and some of them do have a story that runs through in different medias, and others, maybe they just thought this is enough. And maybe I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, can you give me an example of something that we've maybe seen in our current media, in our time, of what you would consider a good story versus an ad?
So I think, let me touch upon the example you mentioned. You said you were driving down a highway and you saw an ad with a competitive ad. Okay, because so competitive ad means you saw a huge number. You saw a huge sign, dollar sign, and cash and cash flying everywhere, right? So I would challenge everyone who can say that that's a story, because that is, and I'll tell you something. You mentioned something that you said, audiences, right? Yes, there are audiences who get attracted by figures and numbers. Now those will, we call them those who fish, those who do gamble, those who, apologies for the word, but that's because they would jump from a place to another to grab the next big thing. but those are you can't communicate with them through absolutely through billboards. So I think a story would be when you tell a customer why does he need to bank with you versus someone else. And a more beautiful story would be if I tell the customer, I'm sorry, I can't serve you, go to that other bank, they can serve you. I think then you can say the end.
Okay. And I have to say something here that the story has to have a value and it has to go viral. That's a story. But outdoors are advertising, short-term advertising or long-term advertising. And outdoors has a mission. The mission is to keep top of mind.
Absolutely.
One day, if you are in Majlis, someone says, I want credit card, oh, I saw Ithmar Bank. It's my client, so I say it. I saw Ithmar Bank.
Okay.
Okay? So I want that restaurant. Okay, let's go to Mayam in Galleria, because I saw that, again, another client.
Yeah.
So the story is, you have to give a value, and it has to be viral. That makes a good story. That at any time, if someone has a discussion, you have to talk about that. But the other promotional advertising materials are not the stories. They are placements, ad placements.
Okay.
Maybe I'll talk from a small and medium kind of an enterprise, because obviously we can't compete with the big advertising and the big billboards and those huge budgets that are put into this kind of advertising. So social media has been a great platform for every company to create its own reality show, right? We all have these fantastic platforms to give our thoughts, our stories, to tell our story, to talk about our product in an open way, in a great way, and for people to communicate with us. Not only they can become part of the story, they can give us feedback. It's like an these games that are interactive. What is going to happen next? What is going to happen next? And I think we're lucky that we live in a world today that allows this kind of interaction. And I think sometimes, yes, the banks and these really big clients might have that challenge because they need to move from that big billboard number into more feelings and substance. Yes, as a consumer, I want my benefit, but I also want to be safe, and I want to be, I want to feel good about myself. So, yeah.
If I may add something here, and you mentioned Netflix, right?
I love Netflix.
Yeah. So
not advertising. I'm a customer.
So, I mean, you just reminded me of a great example. And if you guys remember when I first spoke, I said that it's a both-way communication. How many of you watch Black Mirror? Black Mirror. So they did something lately for the first time that as you're watching the episode, it stops and asks you to choose, to make a decision. So you have an influence on the storytelling. So you can change the story the way you want. And this started in gaming.
Yeah.
So yeah, it started in gaming, and then there are thousands of different variations of the story. So I think the bottom line is that engage the clients with the story. Let them be part of it.
Okay, and I think sometimes that within the story you can enter, like you can bring in values, right? Like you can bring in good values or good feelings or good, I mean, if you ask me how did you build your story? So we've put some values, 5 values for my company, and sometimes it's a challenge for us to make sure we remember these 5 values, because sometimes you do something and then you do something else, and it's like a conversation. You move on and you don't remember the first conversation you were having. So it's very important to go back to that conversation and to make sure that these values are met, and that, yes, we're about this, we're about that, and stick to the same theme. Otherwise, the customers will get upset, by the way. They could get upset. They wouldn't be happy because they came on board liking that first initial value, and then you go and change that on them. Why? Why? It's like they get angry at you. Why did you do this to us? Why did you change? Why? So I think it's important to stick to values, to you know, and to create season 2 of the same values, since we're in series analogies, to do, you know, to take the same نفس القصة بس غير, same but different, huh? But you know what? There's something nice about that, because it's managing customer expectations, because that's who they expect you are. But how can you make a better, nicer, more exciting version of that story? You know, if all of a sudden the Kardashians decided to go and, I don't know, study literature, I don't think the people who watch them would be interested, right? So there's some expectations watching that. You would, I see you there. I know you agree with me. So, so it's true. People have expectations, and we want to stick to those expectations.
Definitely.
And that's what happens with storytelling. That it needs to be, you know,
I guess
the same theme. Yes,
because it is a challenge, like you're saying. If you're at season 7, how much can you really keep reinventing? You really have to be very creative and still stick to what your customer is expecting, because that's what they know you for. I'd like to ask a question, Ali, from your experience with different campaigns, with different media. One of the campaigns that I recently saw that I was extremely impressed with was Hunger Station, and I know you had an involvement with that. And one of the things that impressed me was you're driving on the highway, and there's a billboard, there's those lampposts throughout in some areas. You're watching a YouTube video, and there they come up, and you know,
wherever you go.
Wherever you go, exactly. And it's the same, but it's different.
Yeah.
So it's maybe some of the same people, some of the same theme. So what's the back end of that? Like, what do you need to do to set up something like that to be able to do it in such a unified and smooth way?
Of course, you need to plan very carefully. You need to study your segment. She said about segment. So you need to know, I need segmentation, I need good planning, I need very strategic planning, and I need the payment, I need the money. So I know where I am investing that money in, you know, various medias. Outdoor is very expensive, so you have to go very key locations as per the segmentation that you have. Digital is, let's say, it's less cost, but you can have a bigger reach. So to complete the story, we want all type of mass. So Hunger Station at the end is a food app, and you want everybody to use it. You know, you want kids, you want middle people, you want youth, you want even, you know, retired people. So that's why you need to have a media mix. Again, you know, I'm talking about the media mix here is not the channels, it's the real media mix, you know, outdoors, radio, TV, and then digital. So when you have a big, giant client and product launch, then you have to think like this, you know, where I can be at any time that, you know, my customer can see it. And then I have to complete the message. If they saw it on outdoor, I have to complete it by digital, and digital I have to give value. Because at the end, you have a very limited space on outdoor. You can have one key message, but on digital, you can have many messages. And I think Unbound is all about startups, and startups have a lot of stories to tell. So once they go digital, they have to tell story with key messages, different messages, and segmentations. So that's why what we did is we had different messages on digital as per the segmentation. Especially nowadays when you have different offers on different restaurants, then we attract the people who would like to have breakfast with, you know, breakfast things. And then when people have like to go Asian restaurants, they know when they follow some others. You know, in digital you can do amazing stuff. You need to study digital really and see what every channel can do for you, so you can create and develop that campaign or that piece of content or story to fit that segmentation and the channel.
Thank you for the lovely testament to digital, and I completely agree with that. There's all sorts of crazy things you could do, and to answer the question as well, broadly, a strategy is what you need. So in order to cyberstalk people in literally every single touch point you can imagine online and offline, a strategy would boil down to 5 points. So your KPIs, what are you actually trying to do? Your audience, understanding them, how they behave, what they do. There's all sorts of tools, free and paid, that are not only available to agencies, but to anyone who's keen enough to find out. Number 3, A little competitor analysis. So in the case of Hunger Station, we look at Talabat, whoever else is a player these days, Carriage and so on, what they do, how they do. And 4, a tone of voice, because since we're talking about telling stories, I think that the best advertising often masquerades as a story. It's very heartfelt, it resonates with people, but the key to unlocking that is how you talk to people. So you have to define that irrespective of who works on the particular brand. And finally, an action plan that would include, as my colleague Ali said, a media mix, what you do on each channel, how you execute each particular campaign, etc. And you know, with proper planning, you can very easily tell a nice, unified, consistent story that resonates with people across all channels that give you the highest return on investment, of course.
Okay. May I disagree for a change?
Of course, please
okay.
do.
Okay, it's very exciting you mentioned Hungry Station because, in my view, my humble view, not just because you're a bank with a competitor, I think they're not telling any story. I think they had a lot of money, and it was an amazing launch, because you see it everywhere. But what is their differentiation? So if I ask, okay, if I'm supposed to buy from Talabat or Carriage or Hunger Station, how is Hunger Station different? Other than the ad itself looked very funky and cool. I loved it. I still, you know, so it's stuck.
It's catchy.
It's catchy. But is it a story? I don't think so.
It is. You need to understand the words. إذا كنت جوعان ما يبي لك إلا Hunger Station.
So let's not advertise for Hunger Station. By the way, Ali's using this to get, you know, paid from the client for more advertising on stage here.
I mean,
I'm kidding, I don't know.
Whenever I'm hungry, I remember my mom, but so I think because we don't have much time, I'll just say, when you have a new product, okay, you have thought of a differentiation. That's why you introduced that product, right, or that brand. You said, I'm different because. If it was about being a Bahraini company, then play that game and tell that story. One last thing, and you guys remember the NASA example when there was a janitor cleaning the floors, and then someone, I think the president asked this person, what are you doing? He said, I'm sending a man on the moon, right? What does it mean? That we're all working towards sending that man to the moon. So I don't think I think it was a great campaign. It was a great media buy, but I don't think it was a complete story. And I'm not sure if you guys agree, but yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that opinion. It's very interesting to see the different perspectives. Since we're coming up to the end of our time, I would just like to ask each one of you, since this is an event for startups and entrepreneurs, what advice would you give a startup, someone with limited funding, limited time probably? What kind of advice would you give them in order to get them out there and really start thinking about storytelling? How do I do this? How do I implement it within my limited resources in an effective way, in the most effective way?
I believe that great storytelling is like fantastic packaging. You know, when you get something with beautiful packaging, you just feel that, you know, wow, right? So that feeling, storytelling is that to a brand. And once it's done right, it can actually result in people wanting to be part of that and be involved in it. So find a unique story, which I agree with you, Mahmoud, is find a great story, don't overdo it, and keep building on it. Stay consistent and you know, relate to people. Think of them, your customers, relate to them. So.
Okay, thanks.
I think every startup created his startup because of a cause. Yes. And a cause is to help something or to solve something. That is the story. And you have to tell that I'm doing that. And don't do it to the investors, do it to the customers. You have to go out, you have to go loud to the community, telling that, you know, I did this program, because we've seen a lot of startups, they only tell their stories when there is judges, only. I've
That's
seen
true.
it last week,
That's
I've seen
very
it this
true.
week, you know. But when you go to their accounts and social media, they don't tell that. They don't even take their pictures and videos that, because today, most of the entrepreneurships are, there is someone behind it. So you have to showcase yourself, like Nada and the sister, okay? Both of them are talking about their stories, okay? So they don't have a Starbucks, but they have the two sisters who created something very nice from art. So that's a nice story to tell. I know that every startup has the same type of story that you have to go loud and talk about it.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Don't try to boil the ocean, because it can't be boiled. Start with a drop. Think of something that's great, make it greater. By the way, Toyota does that all the time. They're not always the first time, but they take something so small and make it much better. Look around you. Everything around us are products and services. Please, no more restaurants, no more cupcakes.
I think they stopped in cupcakes.
Yeah,
It's
please.
burgers now.
Yeah, no more burgers. Do fintech. Okay, fintech needs startups. In fact, you know, we have an IT roadmap with more than, I think, 150 projects, and I promise, you can take my word, start a fintech, solve a problem, and you'll be our first client.
Thank you.
So advice to startups, broadly, it comes down to focus. And if you see that as an acronym, it's follow one course until successful. What you need really to succeed is perseverance more than anything else, because any problem can be solved, whether we're talking about storytelling, marketing, operations, whatever it may be. And just stick with it. The idea is that you started this to solve a problem that you experienced or you've seen someone or heard of someone experience. That is a great place to start the story. Use everything at your employ and persevere. Focus and follow one course until successful.
Great. Thank you so much. I think this was a lot of really great insight. Our time is up, but it was a pleasure.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The other one? Thank you, Dina. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Right now, we're gonna get into the elevator with Kharabish. Wa'al Atili will talk about Kharabish, and let's see how far from the ground he's gonna take us.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Darren. I'm the head of innovation here at Unbound Bahrain, and it's really great to be here with Wael, who is going to share some of the story from his business, from starting out through to what they've learned in the 11 years that they've been going. So if I could just start by introducing them.
Can you hear me, guys? Well, thank you for staying here and being at this session. I am so happy. This is my first time in Bahrain, and I'm so keen to explore this beautiful country. Hopefully, maybe it's going to be our next destination to expand. My name is Wael Attili. I'm one of the co-founder of a company called Kharabish, and don't ask me why we called it Kharabish. It was a long time ago when we were young and spontaneous. And basically, Kharabish is a digital media company. We started back in 2008, and we've been with the development, like how the whole industry, since 2008 until now, we've witnessed all the changes and dynamics of this industry throughout the 11 years.
And like you say, and founding in 2008. That's when digital media was really just starting to take off. So where did the idea come from to set up?
Well, it's actually started during the blogging, when the 2.0, Web 2.0 started, and we started to see a new generation of blogger. Me, myself, was a blogger. And the idea and the notion of the desire to create content freely this is exactly where the concept of Kharabish started.
So
the
really
idea of
like
how can freely create content.
So
and
encouraging people to create their own content and giving them a platform
put
to do
our
that.
shares of knowledge and experiences on the web. That was basically the main driver of how we founded Kharabish.
Fantastic. And so the founding team is, you very much founded the business to begin with, but over the years it's grown, right?
So yeah, by the way, we're 5 founders, and I remember when we started and we started to raise investment, it's like a nightmare for investors to see 5 founders. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, you're not gonna stay. But till now, 11 years, we are still 5 working founders. Nothing changed. So that was one of the biggest challenges that we proved. Sometimes it can work out, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. Again, when we started back in 2008, we didn't actually have any clue about entrepreneurship, about the ecosystem, about, there's something called investment. We just wanted to open our own business, and it wasn't our first trial. We, as 5 founders, we had our own shares of, finding our own companies and failures until we came together again and started Kharabish, the story of Kharabish. And we were self-funded until from 2008 to 2010.
Yeah.
This is where we joined Endeavor Jordan. And since that turning point, everything has changed.
And what kind of role do you feel that Endeavor played? Like, as 5 first-time entrepreneurs, is that right?
Yeah.
What did Endeavor set you up for?
Well, basically, when we joined Endeavor, we started to understand what is entrepreneurship is about. Okay. And running a business is not just like, doing the thing that you love without calculating, cost. And we started to learn actually the basics of finance.
Of the business.
Of the business, and how to develop a business model, and how to develop a proper structure for your operation and company and organizational structure, and how to, and the concept of investment by itself. It wasn't known for us. What does it mean for an investor to come in and take a share equity, and what is the value of that, and how to scale your business? It just moved us from, honestly, a naive entrepreneurs into a really visionary entrepreneurs, and taking, a much bigger scale of what possibly we can do.
And of course, if you're 5 founders and you're going through that educational process of what a business is, to anyone that's setting up their own business and they're figuring out, is it a friend or is it a co-founder, what came out from the 5 founders going through that process? Was there clear roles for individuals within the business, or?
Well, yeah. At the beginning, the relationship between founders is like marriage, okay? And it's not an easy kind of relationship to manage. It's very important because 70% of failures goes from disagreement between founders.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, when investors are investing in a company, they don't look at the business model. They don't look at, they look at the business model, but it's not. They are not investing in the company. They are investing in the founders.
Yes.
So the synergy and the founders themselves are the core of each company.
Yeah.
And this is very important for any entrepreneur to understand really well, because when we sign an agreement with an investor, there is a lockup. You cannot have a plan B.
Yeah.
You don't. If the investor sees you with a plan B, he will not trust you and he will not put his money with you. So you have to be fully dedicated, and you have to prove to them that you as a founder has to have a synergy between each other. Now, by the time we had to take many roles, like, during my 11 years, I took so many roles, from being a CEO to being to let go of being a CEO and giving it to my partner in different stages, and we took many hats and many roles according to the stage of the company where we find suitable, and also according to our personal passion. It took us some time to stabilize this, okay, but we've had our ups and downs on that, and it wasn't easy process for the founders, emotionally and physically. Actually, it was a very hard learning curve for us.
I think when we were speaking just before coming on stage just now as well, we were talking about kind of how Endeavour helped you understand the role that those sort of programs can play in somewhere where it's nascent, like here in Bahrain. But also there's, when you got that first investment, the lessons didn't stop at Endeavour, they continued, and you learned a lot with that first investment, right?
Yes, so basically, actually, I'm going to be honest, Endeavour helped us take our first investment, angel investment, especially when we started talking about evaluation, or valuation of the company, okay? So they helped us how to project this, they helped us build a proper financial, proper structure at that time, and they introduced us to the investors who are basically still today supporting us on every single round. And actually also they help you, or at least mentorship helps you to understand the stage your company is in, because believe me, companies are like a human being. Each stage has its own dynamics and had its own let's say definition by itself. Yeah. Like for example, when you talk about startups, in the startups the level of innovation is really high versus monetization. So the focus of startups at early stage is goes to innovation rather than monetization. But when you move to the scale up stage, then the more focus will go into monetization versus innovation is going to go and become less and less. And this change, sometimes it has its own emotional impact on founders. And sometimes a lot of founders, they don't like it, they just stop at that road, they want to find something else. And how to flip from innovation to monetization, this is one of the hardest things that a founder could do.
In the future stage earlier today, there was a discussion about a startup is only a startup until it's got its business model. Yeah. The moment you've got your business model, you can start to scale. Starting from Jordan, and then scaling into new markets across the kind of Gulf community, what were the kind of hurdles that you felt that were experienced just in entering those new markets, trying to understand whether you could set up teams there and grow that way?
Yeah, so actually, yes, we started in Jordan, but since the day one, we wanted to be a pan-Arab company. One of the things that I would like to highlight is basically when you get investment, you think that it's going to be easy for you to scale, and it's easy for you to convert this investment into revenue and continue on. The mistake that we did in Kharabish, and we did it so many times, is basically when we get this, when we get the investment, we completely expand the operation without thinking about expanding our monetization and getting revenue instead. So we hire and we scale, but our revenue did not scale with it. Yeah. And we ended up spending all the money and then hit the wall. And it happens to us so many times. So my advice to any startup, to any high, make sure that you guys scale in a very planned and cautious way, in a way that you scale your revenue more than you scale your operation and cost. So this is a very tricky part, and most of entrepreneurs face is basically when they bring investment into their company, their cost scale up, but their revenue don't. So we're back to square one, and sometimes we're back to a much harder position than we started.
I think that's a really valuable lesson. A lot of founders think that they can scale and scale and scale, but they forget about the sustainability.
Especially in our region, because setting up in different countries is not easy as we think of. Like we started an office in Egypt back in 2010 and in Tunisia back in 2010 as well. This is the first two offices we opened after Amman, and we couldn't sustain because simply we couldn't generate business in Egypt and Tunis. Then we started to head into Dubai, and our first office was actually, we registered the company in 2010, but we failed miserably. And we kept 5 years trying to register and to start an operation. It's not, when you talk about scaling in the market, it's not just registering a company and legal entity. It's never been that. Now you can easily register anywhere. You can go to Jordan, to Bahrain, to Saudi, everywhere you can register. The trick is how to lead and generate business. This is where you need to understand, is basically, is it good market for you? Can you generate businesses? So our strategy has shifted in a different way. So we go to a new market, we start building projects, we start generating revenue, and when we see a momentum, then we go and hop in and register and start an operation.
And those lessons were obviously learned very well. Because
after 10 years, we've learned that and losing, millions of dollars.
And I think in 2015, you got the kind of seal of approval with your Series A.
Yeah, so in 2015, it took us like a really hard work to understand what do we need from UAE, where we can generate and lead business from UAE, and why do we need to register in UAE. And then at that time, we understood that agencies and brands in the region are based in Dubai. So we hired the proper team who can build bridges between us and the agencies and brands, and we managed to build a good relationship with them and credibility. This is where we jumped in and registered a company in UAE after understanding where we can generate business.
So there's almost this kind of repetition of finding out someone that can help you understand the ecosystem, help you understand where you can do business, and then giving you a little bit of a kind of introduction.
So part of the ecosystem is not just the legal structure and legal setup. Part of it is how to generate business, or what this country, or let's say, what is the benefit or the strategic positioning of this country for your business. Some countries would work for operation, and they would really work as an operation, not as a market. And some countries, they are really good market. So you need to understand in terms of your business as a startup, if I want to scale in a country, how strategically I'm going to position this country in my scale-up strategy.
So in that sense of figuring out the strategy, what countries are best to go into? What's next? What's next for the business? What's next? Where do you see yourself going?
Exactly. So you need to understand what is next, and for example, now we're looking at Iraq, for example. Okay. Iraq is, in terms of digital media, like our business, we work with YouTubers, we work with influencers, we work with digital marketers. And amazingly enough, that Iraq is the second largest market in terms of YouTube consumption after Saudi Arabia, and almost very close to Saudi Arabia. Okay. So for us, Iraq is a very interesting market to look at. For example, when we talk about Egypt, Egypt is full of talents, and basically the cost of operation is really reasonable and good. So it's a different how we look at each market from one another.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I believe that is our 15 minutes up. So thank
you so much for hosting me. I hope that it was beneficial and valuable for you guys. And I'm here for today and tomorrow if you need any question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Wael. That was very high. So next, the secrets of building disruptive startups. Let's hear from Arij, Idris, Badr, and Abdul Aziz, and my friend Robin Waters. Actually, he just taught me how to pronounce his name. He says Robin Waters. So I hope I said that right, Robin. the founding editor of Tech EU from Belgium.
Thank you so much. Follow me. Hey, pleasure to be here. It's actually my first time in the Middle East, and I haven't been here for even 24 hours, so this is quite exciting for me as well. Every panel starts with an introduction, but I'm going to let my panelists do that first, and then I'll introduce myself a little bit more. We'll go from left to right. Arish.
Hi, I'm Arij, and I'm from the Bahrain Development Bank. I run the Development Services Division, and most recently, I lead the fund management for the Al Waha Fund of Funds.
Very concise, thank you.
Hello guys, I'm Idris Arifai, founder CEO of Fetcher. We do e-commerce logistics all across the GCC.
It was even more concise.
Hi, I'm Badr Ward, CEO of Lamsa, the leading brand and platform for children's edutainment in Arabic in MENA.
I'm Abdelaziz Hayat, associate at Faith Capital Holding in Kuwait, an early stage VC focusing on seed and Series A companies.
Great, and as mentioned, my name is Robin Wouters. I'm a technology journalist based and specialized in Europe. So this is uncharted territory for me as well. They think they're doing me a favor by inviting me to moderate this discussion, but actually, I'm here to learn. So they're my teachers, and we're going to talk about how to build disruptive startups, which is a term I don't particularly like a lot. So rather I have a discussion about how do you scale startups in this region, how is it different or similar from other startup ecosystems, and yeah, what can we improve in the region? So I guess that's the main question. The reason I'm interested in this is because I've been researching startup ecosystems for quite a while now, about 15 years. And I see these things coming back all the time. You have in my view, the internal process of building a startup is, you need to find a business model, you need to develop a product or a service, you need to find product market fit, you need an addressable market, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have all the other elements which are sort of outside of all that have a direct effect on your ability to scale, but you don't necessarily have any control over. And that's what I call an ecosystem, which is made up of the talent that's available, the capital that's available, the infrastructure, sometimes the raw infrastructure, the roads and the airports and the Wi-Fi connections. And then you have sort of everything else, the culture, the mindset, the corporates, the other startups. Do they engage with one another to learn from each other, to lift each other up? All of that is what I call ecosystem. So these two things are what we're going to talk about. And I would love, this is a really basic question, but essentially, if I look at the startup ecosystems, I should say, because one thing that I've learned is it's quite fragmented in the region. We'll dive into that. But what can you tell me about the startup ecosystems in this region that I don't know as a novice?
Now we start from right to left.
Now we start from right to left. Aziz, you go first.
Right to left. First thing I'd say is just because most of the cities in the region are within driving distance of each other doesn't mean they have the exact same ecosystem. If you come here with an outsider's perspective and start looking for like a Silicon Valley type origin story, you will be sorely disappointed. Our startup system doesn't cluster around universities. It doesn't cluster around well-known angels with so-and-so exits in the region. We still depend on the traditional sources of financing, which is the family funds and certain individuals within certain families who you'd say are more responsible for that kind of deployment and that risk and that appetite for risk. The other thing is, depending on where you're talking about exactly, so in the UAE, it's all about importing talent to a quote-unquote sexy location where people would love to come spend a few years and spend their time at a startup. In Kuwait, it would be a bit more homegrown. You see a lot more Kuwaitis in the region, but there's still quite a bit of imported talent, especially in the fields that are very, very difficult to fill with local talent because we don't exactly have anywhere to poach from. I think the huge pain points would be marketing and technology. The in-house offshore type GCC startup model is becoming more and more prevalent. Frankly, I think if it wasn't more and more prevalent, we wouldn't be seeing the amount of startups that we're seeing nowadays, mainly because the talent issue would be a prohibitive factor. In terms of the financial aspect, I'm going to boil this down very basically into talent and money, even though I can go on for an hour easily. So on the money side of things, the cash exists, it's there. The issue is the sophistication required for certain people to deploy it in certain situations. Folks like Faith Capital, we're working on that. We're kind of educating the ecosystem, and thankfully now that there are more successful startups out there and some more exits, although the exits are still kind of heavy in terms of the F&B delivery space, you know, those former founders and initial employees are going on to become better founders second time around and better funders first time around.
Well, let's get the founder perspective, because we have two startup entrepreneurs here, Idris and Badr. Maybe your perspective on the ecosystems, I always say, from your point of view.
I mean, I think the ecosystem changed dramatically in the past few years. So when I started the company 6 years ago, that was a completely different story. I mean, especially, so if you look at funding, getting like seed money, like $1 million or close to that, was very difficult back then. Now I feel like it's much easier. You have like accelerator incubators. You have quite a lot more. It's more, I mean, far from being perfect, but I think the angel ecosystem is getting, you know, like structured. I found it much easier to do it than what it was like 6 years ago. I mean, right now I think that the valley of death for startup is really like large Series A all the way to like Series B, C. So if you want to raise anywhere between $10 million to $50 million, $70 million, it becomes very difficult. Why? Is because your business is still intrinsically risky, right? Because you're a startup and you're disrupting it. Your revenues are going up, but you fail to actually find the right type of, that's what I found, to find the right type of investors. One of the things that I didn't expect is that I expected like Series C and beyond to be easier. I found this incredibly hard still. So I don't know, like it feels like for me personally, it feels like the ecosystem is getting like ready as I move past it. So I hate it, obviously.
You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, so like I found it still extremely difficult to raise like $100 million plus in this part of the world. You know, despite the fact that you have most of the LPs that are actually based here, but they tend not to invest or diversify their investments out of the region, even though they got fast-growing startups. So I've got literally discussions with like LPs that would like to invest through their US-based funds into Fetcher. So I found it a bit weird.
We're falling back on the topic of investments quite a lot, but I also want to know from the other things that I mentioned, culture, mindset, is there enough talent here? Is there infrastructure? Is everything here in place to sort of go to the next level?
Yeah, I think I share that note with Idris that it's getting easier. So when we started in 2013. A lot of the things that exist today did not exist then. So we had to manually do a lot of the things or kind of lobby or talk to people about just, you know, the idea of, just a small example, we create content for kids. So at that time, any investor that we would talk to and say, we want to build our own content, they're like, no, content doesn't work. And good thing that we didn't listen to them. Like even some of our existing shareholders, we laugh about it now. We kind of say, remember, you know, in 2013, you told us not to build content and we didn't listen to you. And now we're saying, don't do anything except produce more content. And it's because it worked. So, you know, when Netflix and others came and kind of proved that these models work, people kind of bought into the vision that we had. I think the other point was, whenever we talk about infrastructure stuff, so I mean, Fetcher is a really good example. Like I was talking to Idris this morning, a big portion of their business depends on cash on delivery. And you wouldn't expect a service like a subscription service like Lamsa to have cash on delivery for a subscription online service, but we have to do that, and we sometimes work together to deliver subscription via cash, which really doesn't make sense if I say to someone coming from Europe or somewhere else. It's like counterintuitive, but you just have to look at what the customers are doing. I think the third point that I want to mention is when it comes, and I think Idris mentioned this, when we started in 2013 and we got VC money, a lot of the VCs around us were saying, guys, just focus on growing the business. So we grew the business, we continue to grow the business. And then at some point you're like, okay, we're growing fast, super fast, and you look at raising bigger capital, and you see a lot of the attention in the region is focused around seed, Series A, but what happens to the bigger guys that kind of grew based on the seed funding or Series A or B, and then it just becomes, I think, a bit more difficult to continue to grow at the scale that you want to grow with capital from this region. But it's also interesting to see that the LP angle. So LPs here, and it's just a question, like I don't know if you guys, maybe Aris can shed some light on that. She works with a lot of people in the investment space. The LPs here want to invest outside. And then we see a lot of friends from international VCs coming here to raise from LPs here to invest outside. So it's just, and it's quite challenging. We just don't understand sometimes where the money is going or what's the perspective, and we just hear that there's lots of cash here, but where is it going to, which industries? It's quite tricky the way that we look at it.
Well,
that's addressing you.
So. Yeah, no, I know. It's always addressing me right now. I think, unfortunately, or fortunately for both you and Idris, you guys have to pave the way for the rest of everybody. And I think, ultimately, I started with the bank 9 years ago. Before that, I was in more mainstream banking. So for me, entering this world and seeing it grow. So before even becoming an entrepreneur was like a complete taboo. Now you see a lot of parents are so proud. My son started his own business. So that sort of happened. And I think even when it comes to the whole investment perspective, when we first started our investor sort of support workshops about 2-3 years ago, we had people saying, okay, but then how can I guarantee the returns to? And we're like, no, this is not the same thing, And okay, how can I let them project the financials for the next year and how much do I expect to? No, this is not the same thing. But then you have the same group of people and different ones that have actually turned their family offices into venture capital firms that are now looking to do that. They're all fighting over term sheets. And yeah, you guys are unlucky because now you guys are growing. So now we need to educate the people who've been very much more attuned to private equity and the more traditional to actually move into Series C and D. And I think the platform that we've created out of Bahrain, which is the Fund of Funds, is to help build that kind of venture capital capability. And as much as we can, I think the conversations we have, being able to engage with venture capitalists, and it's not only us, I mean, even our peers in Saudi Arabia, even in the UAE, they're all doing that. Albeit we may be the first to have deployed into the region. Our peers are also doing that now. But again, it takes one person to do it, and then, the whole, I hate this word, but FOMO. So everybody wants to, the fear of missing out on the big successes. So, you guys have succeeded. Your big news is coming around in the region about a lot of your peers that has started just at the same time as you guys did. And so that moment when these returns are flooding in and that capital is coming in, people will start to say. And unfortunately, and I'm allowed to say this because I'm from the region, sometimes we have this mindset that, the people outside do it better, so we'll put our money. So if and somebody was talking about this, what if we brought 2 startups and then completely disguised where they're from and their background, and we just tried to have the investor look at the business model rather than, location, etc. You'd probably get a different investment decision. But then, like with everything, it's okay. It's just a challenge that we're facing right now, and I think it'll evolve. But you guys have to be the guinea pigs.
Yes. Paving the way is important, and not just to create role models and this FOMO feeling, but also because it creates sort of a talent pool. People within your company might end up creating the next startups, and if you end up exiting that money, if that goes back into the community, you sort of create a cycle, which is how ecosystems are born, right? So one of the things that struck me, knowing Europe quite well, we always complain about we don't have a unified market, and in certain places in Europe there is a really significant lack of capital available. Coming here to the region, well, at least they have that. They have the money, and they have a unified market, the Arabic language market. What I learned so far in the very little time that I spent here is that that's not the case at all. In fact, your ecosystems in the region are actually quite siloed in many ways, from what I've learned, and the capital doesn't always flow to startups either, the available capital. So that's a learning for me. But what I really want to talk about is one of the aspects that I mentioned in the beginning. What makes an ecosystem is the talent, meaning you need the right people for you to set out your vision and to sort of build the product and service that you have in mind. You also need entrepreneurs. You need people who want to start their own companies for the right reasons, with the right support. So this is a question to you. What is the availability of talent like here in Bahrain and maybe beyond in the Middle East?
Maybe the entrepreneur should take that. Okay. Oh, Aziz, go ahead.
Sure. Talent is quite possibly the most common complaint I get from founders in our portfolio and during the interviewing process. Again, talent differs. The issues with talent, I mean, that you're going to face differ greatly depending on what position you're trying to fill and what vertical this business is in. First of all, some business models are simply not possible because the talent you need specifically, say in tech or in product, does not exist in this region, period. The other issue is when you find it elsewhere, they don't come to the region, period, because like you said, they can't exactly hop from one startup to the next when they get bored in a 2-year time frame. You know, there's the natural churn that occurs. The churn is to pack up and leave the country, which most people don't want to do and would rather keep, you know, building roots in an ecosystem. So I guess to a degree you do have that chicken and egg problem with the talent problem. One thing that does work, however, is so long as maybe the region, not so much Bahrain, I think the Emirates has it easiest in terms of finding international talent. And international talent is not something that you can lump into one category because they all act in a certain way. To give you an example, say I know startups in Saudi. I'm trying to be very careful not to give away that right detail that you can Google. But startups in Saudi have been able to get a great deal of talent from Jordan and from Egypt, particularly in the tech space, and particularly in business models that require a lot of their own software being written ground up, as opposed to getting a guy to manage your third-party integrations, which is sort of the more likely CTO in the region. If you're looking at talent that's not available unless you look at the universities that cluster this sort of talent and produce it and foster the events that tend to attract it, certain hotspots in Europe or the US, that talent will almost never move here unless it's a giant meal ticket. They know they can make X amount. They have their spreadsheet set up. So to a degree, answering this problem is kind of having to build just this model of understanding of the psychology of the person you're trying to attract and what they're trying to accomplish. And there's a significant misalignment there. What needs to happen, because I'll end it with this. One of the main issues with the talent problem is the discussion always starts as what seems like an economic or organizational planning issue, and then it quickly veers off into a political debate of what visas to issue and what amount and how do we get them, et cetera, and who gets what allotment. What needs to happen is the reinvestment in the region to make sure that the talent is being produced here, and stopping long-term mismatches in terms of what markets need and what markets can produce, and then just creating this feedback loop of dependency on outside talent. Whether or not the Dubai model can be replicated with sort of free trade zones and whatnot in the region to quickly adopt the talent that you need. Frankly, that's way outside my pay grade, being able to answer that. But I think in the immediate term, we should focus more on talent retention and less on talent creation, because that's more of a long-term problem to solve.
Idris, same question. Your view on the availability of talent?
Developing talent? So, I mean, I would echo, like, I think most of what you're saying. I think that some functions are just like impossible to find talents. I mean, so I don't know if we're really poor at this, but we failed quite a few times in actually building and scaling up a tech team in multiple places. So we have about like 80 engineers now, close to 100 with the data science, and we've just been unable to find. So when I got we're going through due diligence right now, and I say my tech team is across like three countries, 4 offices. It's crazy, right? So because obviously it creates like a lot of legacy with regards to work, like how you're gonna divide the work. So obviously we have microservices and so on. So we're trying to build that on microservice base, but still there is quite a lot of communication that needs to happen. So I think on the tech side I mean, I'm almost like giving up in building a scalable tech team in Dubai that can serve my tech needs, right? Why is because like it's so expensive to bring somebody here, and then it would just being poached so fast, right? So like honestly, like, at some point I wonder if I'm not a recruiting agency for the big group, right? Because they say, okay, fetcher 6 months, okay, triple the salary. So you can retain people at 2x salaries. 250% becomes the breaking point, right? So literally you pay X and then they're being poached at 2.5X. That becomes really difficult to retain, irrespective of what you're doing. And all the groups are, can actually put that money on the table. So I think that's one of the problems that we have not solved, and I just don't think it's solvable at scale, right? So I think having a couple of people in the team, within the tech team, and being able to retain them is a problem that can be solved like 5, 10, but having 100 plus is just impossible.
Arish, I see you nodding, so you're in agreement, but do you have anything else to add to that discussion?
I mean, look, I'm going to be the optimist about the
we
region.
Need those.
Yeah. Look, again, I think it's just, it's a matter of time. I think, especially here in Bahrain, we're quite an open economy, so being able to attract talent, there various things that, people will look for. So obviously career progression, whether there's enough, are there startups they want to work in that are here? And at the same time, is it a nice place to live in? Ultimately, we're all human beings, so it's not just, the whole tech and the building the company, but it's ultimately how we actually feel living in the place and working. It'll take time. I think universities obviously play a part, but I don't think we need to wait for the next generation to graduate, but I think it works in tandem. I think obviously the education and including, the type of skills that are required in technology is something that's important. And I know that not only is Bahrain doing that, but also our peers, but I think it's also identifying, and then obviously we need the guinea pigs that have started this earlier to identify the things that are missing, and for them to have the ability to speak to some of the decision makers to be able to attract those kind of skill sets and help them out. Because ultimately, when you're in early ecosystems, it's about the government working closely with the private sector. I feel like there needs to be that hand in hand, and people forget that's what happened in Silicon Valley and other places, because the government was very supportive of the whole entire ecosystem.
Pretty much started all of it 60, 70 years ago, I would say. Yeah. But it's an interesting point that I was just going to mention that, because we haven't touched on anything government or policy related yet. And when I was young and naive, I used to say, oh, the government should just get out of the way and let the entrepreneurs do their thing. And now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I know that that's impossible. And it's probably for good reason as well. But a government can only do so much. And like I've seen policies implemented all over Europe and some other parts of the world as well. I would, sort of the stereotype that I had before coming here was that the government was super supportive, because this event is a sort of a testament of this as well. At the same time, this is anecdotal, but I was talking to an entrepreneur earlier today who was building a digital bank and told me that the regulation actually sort of forces him to have a physical branch just to prove that they're a real bank and that they exist as a real, which is sort of counter to the notion of, we want to innovate, we want to progress. So I'd love to get your perspective. I'm a novice here. I don't know anything about the regulation and the policies in place, but I want to hear from you. Is the government supportive? What more can they do? And what should they stop doing? Badr, I'm going to start with you.
So I'll answer that, but I'll just go back to the talent. I want to be optimistic a bit, as Arish was saying. We keep referring to ourselves as MENA startups. So I think we were quite lucky as Lamsa to look at the region as a flat region when it comes to talent. So one of the hacks that I think we were able to do is look at where the talent exists. So for example, some places are known for technology, the others for creativity, and we actually were able to set up pockets of talents in those places that worked out really well for us. So I would say we're a bit lucky when it comes to talent. Lamsa as a total organization, we're at about 80, 90 people, and we're both focused on content and technology. So we've been able to find those places where we tapped into a lot of great talent. Of course, we have to enhance the talents. We have to get people with more knowledge and depth and experience to raise the bar when it comes to standards. But it's been quite good for us in terms of talent. I think we're also lucky from the other side, which is the cause that we work for probably attracts a lot of people. So we're as you were saying, it's not just about the economics of joining a startup in MENA. It's also, we have people that worked for Disney for many years and felt like they want to give back to society, do something. They had kids of their own and they wanted to kind of feel that they're doing something that's more education related. So we've been very lucky in terms of talent for those two reasons. Going back to your question about government, I think we can't generalize. We've worked with multiple governments across the region, and I think, again, being positive, we've seen a lot of support from various governments. So I'll just, I live in Abu Dhabi now, and one of the reasons that actually made me live in Abu Dhabi is the support of the government. So we've seen tremendous support in terms of the government of Abu Dhabi. We've worked with the government of Dubai, the government of Saudi, and I think, especially in the last few years, if you have a great idea that solves a big problem in society, I think people are starting to listen. We see more younger ministers taking positions, more open-minded, very highly educated, irresponsible people taking key positions across governments in the region. And I think if you have a solution to a big problem, they're quite ready and open-minded to listen to it. I'll end with a last example. So last year we came out with this concept of launching a theater show for kids based on our IP and content, and every government that we talked to was very open-minded. The moment that they saw that this is a new innovative product, we kind of signed deals with ministries of culture in the UAE, Ministry of Entertainment in Saudi, and we've been rolling out these programs. We must have run about 18 shows so far. I think if we were in another place, we wouldn't have been able, or another geography, I don't think we would have been able to get that product out to the market and activate it in that speed without the support of such government entities.
Very cool. Very interesting. I would be remiss if I also didn't ask you for your, you sit sort of in the middle, but your opinion on government and policy.
Look, I mean, I think government works hand in hand, and ultimately, the role of government is to enable the private sector and to help it thrive. So I'm in agreement with you, because sometimes some people say, oh, the government needs to step back. Yeah, the government will step back when the private sector is, able to flourish and do it on their own. But when it comes to policy, and then to your comment on that digital bank, I'm not sure who that entrepreneur is or whatever the case is, but I mean, Bahrain has quite a progressive regulatory sandbox when it comes to fintech. We've also released, the cryptocurrency type of regulation, which I know some of the even more progressive economies haven't even and are still sort of worried about doing. So it's very easy to just pick on what we don't have, but let's try to see, and again, being the optimist, what we actually have come about. So if I go back 9 years ago, and I'm sure Idris and Bedr will agree with me when they first started, there was actually very little support in the whole region. But ultimately, look at them, they're still here. If an entrepreneur has the drive and the determination and the resilience, they will thrive in any economy. That's what they are, that's what they were made up, and that's what they're made to do. But if we're gonna just wait for the things to happen so that it makes it easier for me, then there's no point, that's not really like an entrepreneur, that's somebody just trying to build a business, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think sometimes you need to have to fight and struggle to create that opportunity. We have 2 companies that graduated from the regulatory sandbox, and I'm sure they had their ups and downs, but what's great about Bahrain is that you have the ability, we're small, we're agile. Being able to access the decision maker is literally a phone call or an email away. And there's not like so many people that you have to get through. So sometimes you take advantage, and to the point of what Aziz and I think Bedr were saying, is that it's where you feel your startup will require support and what works for you, and you'll move there. So it's not about what's better and what's worse, but what's good for you as an entrepreneur. And I strongly believe the ones that continue to thrive and support will find their way and will bring the government with them as well.
As you say, like nobody ever said it was going to be easy, right?
Yeah.
So Aziz, maybe a question going back to talent, because we all talked about talent in the sense of recruiting and hiring and retaining, but I'm also curious to know if there's a drive, if there's a mindset in the people here to want to become entrepreneurs, and if you and the people that you meet in your role, do you meet the ambitious entrepreneurs that any ecosystem needs to sort of take the ecosystem to the next level?
Again, this is one of those questions where the answer gets kind of siloed by geography. In speaking for Kuwait, at least home base, Kuwait has a long and illustrious history of entrepreneurship. The merchant families became the merchant families because of a long line of entrepreneurs men and women have been able to make a name, a sustainable name, and make a lasting imprint in the market. So I think in Kuwait, there's less of that issue. We do see a lot of ambitious Kuwaitis. I'm talking about the venture world and non-venture. A lot of ambitious Kuwaitis are taking the steps to build lasting businesses, things that actually can endure beyond 5 years and generate significant cash flows and employ significant people and play a real role in the local economy. And that's not to say that we don't have like a parallel labor market of the expats who fill in some of the positions and don't really foresee long-term roles in the area. In terms of in terms of GCC talent working elsewhere, for the reasons I think everyone on this panel has enumerated in one way or another, they tend to cluster around certain geographies and operate out of there and then use that as home base to reach out to where they came from and plus neighboring areas and make that their geographic approach. I think all in all, talent willing to be entrepreneurial is present. Opportunity depends enormously by sector. Depends enormously by the resources at the very base level where people would need to raise to get started with only an idea, which becomes restricted to friends and family. Talent, I think, won't be able, there's only a critical mass that you'll be able to hit as an individual talented person with any particular startup working in any particular field. And then you hit that point where you have to kind of look in the mirror and admit to yourself, maybe I am mortal and maybe I do need help. I think that's where people will begin to vote with their feet and will walk to wherever they believe talent happens to be.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on this, or do I move to the next topic?
I think with working with millions of kids across the region, one of the main subjects that we try to encourage kids and teach them is various new fields of interest. So we build content for kids to look at what's out there. So typically we've all been in the region taught to either be a really good engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. I think we've placed a lot of emphasis in Lamsa to teach kids to look at other professions, including becoming entrepreneurs and having the initiative. And I think it's had a lot of impact. So we see a lot of consumption on that kind of content that we create that kind of talks about what professions or what areas of interest could be, including things like promoting a kid to be a chef, for example, right? And we've seen a lot of young boys that have aspirations to get in the kitchen and create things, which traditionally in this area has been kind of limited to different specific genders. So we try to break boundaries and we try to be part of the solution rather than just sitting and saying, hey, we depend on the government for doing that. We could, as Arij was saying, by working together, private and government, we could achieve things, I think.
I mean, purely on the entrepreneur side, I think this region is amazing in that sense, right? There's this bustling energy of and it's driven by both, like tech adoption, the fact that everybody has a smartphone, so they manage to be connected to the online world, to the fact that it's well educated, quite a good purchasing power, most of the time speak 2-3 languages, right? So you got like all these defining factors, and then there is quite a lot of people that are actually interested now in becoming entrepreneurs. So I mean, as much as the ecosystem has like other issues, I don't think that the issue of having like enough people that want to try and become entrepreneur is one of them. The culture is changing, definitely, with regards to the Gulf itself. But if you look at the broader region, you have definitely like quite a lot of entrepreneurs. And I'm mentoring a few companies. I'm surprised by how good they are, right? One of the key things when you look at Europe or the US, like one of the gap that you find is like that motivation, that relentlessness, right? That ability to actually drive the business day in, day out. You don't have that problem here.
Well, then my next question, if I would be an aspirational founder or like a wantrepreneur, as they say, in this region, what vertical should I be focusing on? Is there anything that's severely lacking here that has so much opportunity that should be attacked? Is it fintech? Is it e-commerce marketplaces?
Everything.
Or are we moving to sort of the new AI, blockchain, VR technologies that sort of are hot at the moment? Or Does anyone have a view on which verticals are really ripe for the picking in the region?
I mean, I think all sector, honestly, right? Like, you have all the right fundamentals in this part of the world, right? That's why, I mean, I always love you know, like how it's, you have all these elements that are coming, you know, together at the same time. You have a young population, you got smartphone penetration that is one of the highest in the world, you have the app usage that is one of the highest in the world. You have, like, again, like good purchasing power, you have model that can be disrupted now. And you have, at least, if it's not the same, if it's a very fragmented market, and what we call the Middle East obviously is actually a constellation of very fragmented markets, but you have a common language, so you have a couple of things that you know, are good ingredients to build like a regional product. So look, I think all the ingredients are here. If you look at, even on the, I would say the first generations of e-commerce, of not even e-commerce, of like technology and e-commerce represents less than 1% of retail, while all the ingredients are here to be like 10 to 12%. So even like boring e-commerce companies can grow like very quickly because tons of the segments are not even catered to. So you don't need to be deep tech to actually build a successful business, right? So you can actually just build a very solid business if you have the right fundamentals.
And I think also just being able to identify opportunity, because definitely if I knew the answer to that, I'd be off trying to build that that business. But I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, Bedr and Idris can say this better, but like, I don't know if Bedr just, you know, graduated out of university and then said, okay, these are the missing things, but I think it probably, like you said, it happened by mistake, right? That you identified the opportunity, and I think mostly that's what entrepreneurs do. They find out, oh, well, does anyone do this? And then that's the opportunity. So if you are struggling and facing a problem and, you know, and you are able to try to create a solution that ultimately fixes that, then that's the industry you should be in.
Aziz, do you subscribe to this as well as from the VC side?
You know, I got a lot of pitches that I know are just going to be, you know, fluff on the side of the desk within a half second of looking at the front page. And I think any VC who operates for longer than maybe a month will begin to develop that radar, that sniff test. For me, I think every entrepreneur, and I've honestly considered writing this on the inside of the elevator so that maybe they'd read it. Just every entrepreneur has to answer the question, why are you doing this? How big is the market? And why you of all people? I see a lot of entrepreneurs who really quickly throw together a deck, and you know, sure, it looks interesting at first glance. The graphics are okay, I suppose. You know, you'd want to look at them again, but there's no substance, and there's no reason for me to believe that this is going to be, you know, surviving, let alone thriving 5 years from now. We have, if you were to look at the hierarchy of the startups that we have in the region, and this is just me being brutally honest, at the top tier you have a lot of exits north of $100 million. Kuwait has produced a significant number of those, you know, Talabat and Carriage, and you know, we're looking at a few that are well beyond that in valuation nowadays. In most ecosystems you would have a tier 2 of people who have valuations between say, you know, 10 and 50, who you could reasonably foresee going north of 100, you know, within a few years' time. And then tier 3 is where you have a lot of that weird stuff that sloshes around that I don't know where it came from exactly, but won't go away. And for some reason, we don't have a perfectly built out pyramid. We have, you know, an inflating somewhat top, which is, you know, what we look at as the heralded sign of success. Phase 2 is kind of looking a little skinny. It's gotten better since, you know, I've really started here a few years ago. And it continues to improve. And then you have the phase 3s at the bottom, and some of them just still won't go away.
It's funny that you mentioned that, by the way, because as a journalist, when I get pitched by startups, that's the question I usually ask. Why are you doing this? What's driving you to do this, and why you? Like, what makes you special, right? Just on the side note. We're quickly running out of time, but I'd like to conclude with something. We're going to go one by one. But I mean, if you had all the power, all the time, all the resources to change anything about the ecosystems here in the region, what would it be that you would fix, and why?
That's a hard question.
Left or right?
I think I'd stop the whining. I think ultimately, we spend way too much time trying to identify the, you know, the things that are wrong instead of trying to convert that and actually doing something about it.
You should come to Europe.
No,
we
but
do a lot of
honestly,
whining
I
over
mean,
there.
it's kind of the story of how I fell into what I did. I used to sit down and say, "Oh, we don't have this in Bahrain. Oh, we don't do this in Bahrain." And then my father said to me, he said, "Erij, you know what? You've been able to have the blessing of education. You've traveled around the world. What are you doing to change?" And so, you know what? It wasn't easy. I came from the private sector, different type of environment, different type of culture, and I moved into the public sector. And it's not the same. It's different. And, my team is sitting here in the audience. We've gone through a lot, but instead of whining, that's what I changed. Just stop the whining.
Less whining. I like your dad as well. That's very, very good advice.
I mean, honestly, I think that would be the message, right? I think obviously we have issues in the ecosystem. Obviously, it's a very fragmented market, difficult to retain talents and all of this. But at the end of the day, it's also, what makes an entrepreneur great, I think, is that he sees difficulties as opportunities, right? Honestly, when we face so many issues, that once you solve them one by one, it's as many barriers to entry that you create. Right, so stop thinking about all the things could be different, and so that's one. And then two, I think it's not easy anywhere. I mean, if you look at I don't know if you read Shoe Dog and the last, just read. I mean, if
literally the last book I read.
If the audience has not read it, and if you don't have time to read the full book, just read the last paragraph, the last chapter, sorry, and you're just was it all worth it, right? And his answer is basically no. All right, so it's let's not think that it is also we have our own difficulties, but we don't have the difficulty of hyper competition that you have in the US, for example. That is a huge problem. Nobody talks here about hyper competition, but so some other markets have different kind of issues. So I think it's all about having the mindset that you can. I love the fact that even if it's tough, the entrepreneur will make it happen. Okay, I remember from just one small example. The whole Dubai free zone, the number of employees you can have on your visa depends on how big is your office. Okay, makes sense. Okay, the problem, I'm a logistics company. Yeah. So I've got drivers, I need visas, I'm not gonna increase the size of my office, makes no sense. The ability to actually have access to the CEO of the free zone, and it changed the rule for us. In what country can you do that, right? So you have tons of difficulties, but honestly, you can be strong businesses.
Yeah.
Badr, if you could change anything, what would you change?
I wouldn't look at it that way. I'd say we just have to start believing in each other more. Just picking up on what they said, I'm super optimistic about the region, about us as entrepreneurs, about the ecosystem. I think if we just believe in each other more, because at the end of the day, businesses are built around humans, investors are humans, entrepreneurs are humans, the customers are humans. If we just nurture that power of belief in each other, I think it'll just work out really beautifully. When we started and we were talking about building the biggest brand for kids in the region, very few people believed, right? And the ones that did today are very happy investors, right? And ecosystem players. So I think if we just believe in each other more, and I think that's coming with time, we're seeing a lot of improvement. I think the whole idea of they're different than us, people in the West can do it better. I think we need to change that mentality. When we started Lamsa, we were actually one of the first, if not the first, subscription service for kids that's doing edutainment globally, because we launched before the app stores had subscription. So we did it manually through telcos. And so we do have the ability in the region to invent business models, to invent products and services that compete globally and regionally. So I would just focus on the power of believing in each other and growing that ecosystem together.
I like that.
And just as a small example, recently we got contacted by
very quickly.
The German government. They sent members of the parliament that's responsible for digitization to the United Arab Emirates to learn how can the governments move faster. So we should all be proud that the West is actually looking at this region as examples of how you can move faster in certain fields.
Aziz, I also want to give you the opportunity.
Sure. Very briefly, just to counter Erij, I love whining. I mean, frankly, it's a
I
very
know.
cathartic
That message was to you. No, I'm just kidding.
Secondly, to answer your question, I think, I mean, startups really at the end of the day are a bunch of people and a bunch of buildings and a bunch of paperwork, right? Everything else
You
is
just said
kind of...
they're humans, man.
No, right, I mean, everything else is really in your head, right? I mean, the whole glitz and glamour, it's what we ascribe to it. As for the people component, I mean, we really need to stop, I think, I'm whining again, we really need to stop looking elsewhere to solve that problem. Just, if I had one magic wand to kind of like make everyone change, it would be to tell the local population it's okay to take more risk. You have nothing to lose. You're not going to wind up on the street hungry. It's okay to do things that don't have a perfect 5-year plan to them. Just take a risk. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you learned. And then take another risk.
Perfect. And we just ran out of timer, but I'm going to leave you one thought of my own, which is something that I've observed over the years as well. People underestimate the power of community. When entrepreneurs come together and share their experience and learn from one another and, you know, network, the events like this, but also virtually, and help each other, it makes so much difference. And all the capital in the world and the addressable market, it's relevant. Of course it is. But please also look out for each other. As Idris correctly mentioned, doing a startup is hard. It's a struggle. It's supposed to be, in a way, because nobody said it was going to be easy. So please, please look out for each other and help each other. And that's my note to you. Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Female Founders Challenge. We've got 4 female founders pitching for their businesses, and for a prize to win. The prize is a stand at Unbound Bahrain 2020 and a free month's worth of co-working space at Brink. So just to go into details of the challenge, we've got a 5-minute pitch followed by a 2-minute Q&As, sharp. And let me introduce to you the panel. We've got Maya Rahil from MIT Enterprise. We've got Darren Murphy from Unbound. We've got Sana Haji from BIBF. And we've got Nihal El-Nagar from Royal University for Women. And we've got Amina Al-Hawaj from Bobco. So to start off with the pitching, we've got Sophie Smith from Nepta Health. Good luck.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Salam alaikum. I apologize to those of you who have already heard me speak on the stage today. You've got another, I think, 3 or 4 hours of companies speaking to you, so knuckle down. It's going to be a long night. Nabta Health is a hybrid healthcare platform for women. Our mission is to empower the 500 million women in the MEASA, Middle East, Africa, South Asia region to effectively manage their health. Our ultimate aim is to integrate traditional care with virtual care components and make healthcare affordable and accessible for all women. There are 5 big questions that we're trying to solve, 5 key problem areas we're looking at. For now, we're focused predominantly on fertility for a couple of reasons. Fertility rates have been declining globally over the past 25 years, but nowhere more so than in the Middle East. This is due to the rise of chronic illnesses such as diabetes and obesity, which are responsible for between 60 and 70% of all female-related infertility issues. The problem as we see it is that at the moment there is no easy way for women to connect their wellness to their health, to their medical data. What this means is that there is no way for women to see how their sleep patterns may affect their stress levels, could be affecting their hormone levels, their cycle length, their tendency to develop something like insulin resistance, etc. So we want to allow women to make those connections by creating our model of hybrid healthcare. So what does a hybrid care pathway or a hybrid healthcare model look like? Well, we have got 5 virtual care components: mobile apps, smart medical devices, smart tests, virtual consultations, and machine learning, which we have combined into a single platform. The starting point for most of our users is the Nabta app. It's a 4-mode application that allows women to get fit and healthy, track their cycle with a particular focus on trying to conceive, monitor a pregnancy or prepare for menopause, 4 sequential functions, i.e. you'll never simultaneously be monitoring a pregnancy, and also trying to conceive. These 4 modes are underpinned by 2 bits of machine learning. The first powers a personal health assistant, Aya, whose job is to direct women to insights, information, products and services that are applicable for them. The second is our health score, which is based on about 250 weighted variables that interact in a particular context to give women a health score that's applicable for their goals and what they're trying to achieve in a particular moment. So if I just want to lose weight, I will see a generic health score. If I'm trying to have a baby, then fertility parameters will be kind of applied over the top that will give me a health score in the context of my fertility. In terms of the hybrid components of the platform, we've got a number of different products and services that are implemented or in the pipeline. The first is our real-time fertility monitor. So again, I said we're focused on fertility. This detects ovulation with 99% accuracy. It detects anovulatory cycles and luteal phase progesterone deficiencies. It is a CE-certified, FDA-approved medical device, clinically proven in over 35,000 cycles of use. And it is the recommendation for women who have irregular cycles or some kind of metabolic disorder like PCOS. We are also about to launch a suite of smart tests. These are tests that we either do with one of our partners, Eurofins, it's one of the largest biotechnology testing companies in the world, and they're all home test kits. So if a woman has a suspected hormonal imbalance, she can order this test to her home. She takes the sample, sends it off to a lab, and receives the results digitally. We are working in-house at the minute on developing a point-of-care test device for progesterone that will allow women to monitor progesterone levels in real time. So smart tests, smart medical devices, virtual consultations, machine learning are the 5 key critical virtual care components. This briefly is an example of a user's journey through hybrid healthcare, how a woman could interact with different elements of the platform. And this is our market. The wellness economy is a multi-market opportunity. We're currently targeting 4 key segments within it, using different aspects of the platform, so workplace or corporate wellness, fitness and mind-body, preventive and personalized medicine probably is our biggest market segment, and healthy eating, nutrition, and weight loss as well. We make money from hybrid products and services, so from the sale of devices and tests that are integrated with the platform, through a 3-tier freemium subscription model, and also through affiliate marketing. So because we are the women's health platform in the region, with our quarterly awareness and other campaigns, we've reached almost 10 million women since we launched the platform in August 2018. We're seen as the ideal distributor, source, partner for other high-tech products that exist outside of the region. So obviously we have our own pipeline of products, but also things that we will never develop, but that should still be made available to women here. So we're working with a number of local partners in the US and UK to make their products available to our market. This is our projected revenue. And
Thank you, and that's time.
Great.
So any questions?
Okay, I have 2. The first one is, are you HIPAA compliant? So do you follow the international standards of storing medical records?
Yeah. Yes, we are. So the virtual consultation component of the platform is actually provided by a white label solution provider that we integrate. They are HIPAA compliant. For data verification purposes, looking ahead towards insurance claims, etc., we're building a blockchain element that is integrated with the platform that will also be HIPAA and GDPR compliant.
That's great. Okay, my other question is, how much of this is regulated by the Ministry of Health in the countries that you are operating in?
So most of it. It depends on the category of device or test that we're working with. For example, we have a local authorized representative in the UAE that is currently in the process of registering our real-time fertility monitor for us as a medical device. Depending on this other supplementary services, they will or will not be regulated according to the local legislation.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I just want to, one of the things where I was looking for is, what about your competition? You know how many apps now available, already taking care about the woman thing. So I didn't saw something like you show what is you will be adding to these applications, the exist applications?
So I think the answer is everything. We are aware that we have competitors in the marketplace. I mean, there are various, for example, period tracking apps like Flow, Glow. There are pregnancy apps, but what they offer is data insights at a particular moment in time. They're not necessarily actionable insights, and even if they are, usually the user has to exploit a third party, so they would have to go and see their own doctor and have a set of tests done, and then those test results wouldn't be contextualized within the app itself, whereas with our platform, our machine learning-based assistant can recommend a test that is right for you. You can order it there and then, have it delivered to your home. The results appear in the app, and then you can share those with your doctor again via the platform. So it's about addressing an entire care pathway with technology, not just about building an app that provides an insight at a moment in time.
Thank you. That's time.
Great. Thank you.
So next, we've got Sarah Schwab from the Experience Accelerator. Good luck.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah, founder and CEO of the Experience Accelerator. I have about 20 years' experience in the field of management and leadership development, and for those who know me well, they know I'm pretty passionate about great leaders and managers. It's interesting, before we jump into the slides, I'd like to ask you a question. I'd like you to think about the worst manager you ever worked for and how that person made you feel. A few chuckles around the audience, I can see the thought bubbles. So it turns out that in addition to just making you feel bad, that manager will have had a dramatically negative impact on your discretionary effort and productivity. In fact, 70% of the variation between high and low engagement is down to the manager, which is probably why there's so much focus in this area in recent years. Now, I like to think we're doing something slightly different. So we're taking e-learning, which delivers well at scale, it's cheap, but it's not particularly effective at driving behavior change. One-on-one coaching, on the other hand, is good at driving behavior change, but it's expensive and it doesn't scale. So at the Experience Accelerator, we're trying to break the trade-off between the two and deliver the both in a fully virtual platform. 3 main steps to our approach. Let's take them one by one. So it turns out, if you watch someone performing the behavior you're trying to master, you learn more quickly. So we share videos, insights, content to help learners develop their initial skills in the area. Then we get you to practice. You practice first using your webcam in response to short prompts from the platform. And then secondly, on a video call with one of our live tutors. This session's recorded, uploaded to the platform, and within 24 hours, you get a customized, tailored feedback report telling you what you've done well and where you can improve. Now, we're currently working on something pretty exciting that we're calling our augmented coaches. Let me explain what that is. So step 1 is to create a video with a tutor that acts a little bit like a mirror to your behavior. I can't tell you how many people say, oh, I didn't realize I do that when they see each other on video. Second is to analyze, using machine learning, the conversation. So things like turn taking. Did you ask any questions? Were you empathetic? And so on. So this is an instantaneous analysis complemented by our human coaches. So how do we make money? So we have examples of scenarios on the left-hand side here. The 3-phase learning journey, which I've just described, that costs just $200 US, so per scenario, per learner. And we target 3 major customers: heads of learning and development, heads of HR from large corporations, program directors at training providers. So for example, we're working with the University of Arizona as part of one of their broader programs. And then thirdly, universities and governments. So our traction we're super excited. There was a number of things I could have put on this slide. I wanted to focus on the repeat purchases from some of our pilots. And so you see some pretty interesting names there. We're headquartered in Bahrain. We also have a subsidiary in Switzerland, which explains why we've got a combination of Gulf and European companies there. And we've got some ongoing pilots, both in the region and beyond. And we're also included in some of the world's best executive education providers' proposals, such as the innovative nature of our solution. So to the future, you see here, year by year, how we anticipate growing, healthy clip. I'm delighted to say that against our current 2019 sales goal, we're already 68K fully booked. So I anticipate, unless things go very awry, that we'll do quite well this year already and exceed that number. And you'll see that the markets that we intend to expand into, from a language perspective, we're English language. Our 3 additional languages will be Arabic, Spanish, and French, which covers most of EMEA, as you can imagine. So we're currently looking to raise $250,000 in equity seed money that we will, if successful, distribute in the categories that you see there. We are a graduate of Flat 6 Labs' first cohort here in Bahrain. I'm delighted to be present here for their second demo day, which is upcoming. So our team, Liz Riches, our coaching director, 25 years of experience in the field, Nihar and Salim, our tech team based out of Bangalore, India, as well as 20 plus coaches and tutors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So any questions?
Yes, please. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for your presentation. How can you differentiate yourself from competition?
So it's interesting. We're lucky enough at the moment not to have a like-for-like competitor. How I see it in the market, there are 2 groups of people that we compete against. Some that create very expensive, customized simulations using digital formats. So that would be the likes of BTS, Advantex, who develop simulations, very practical learning for them. For their companies. Or I would say organizations like LinkedIn Learning, who have quite a static format in terms of low interactivity, but wide scale and scope. So for us, I think it's the differentiator is that we're not just having people learn stuff, we're having them practice it in a very practical way.
Okay, coming to this point, you mentioned that whoever is doing this exercise has to make a video.
Correct.
For maybe females or people coming from this culture, maybe they might have a certain restriction or maybe they would mind.
Exactly.
How can you overcome this?
So I think 2 ways. So first of all, it's always a permission-based. So people have the right to opt in, and that we're very clear, particularly in this part of the world, around the video. The approach actually works quite well without video. So just using voice with no visual representation. The conversational analytics work in the same way. And the feedback, it's interesting. You probably need a minute or 2 worth of conversation in order to give meaningful feedback. So that works well without the video. You obviously lose some of the body language aspects, but it's certainly not a deal breaker.
Hi.
Hi.
Your number in the slides regarding your return customers and the demand seems pretty high for your services. How do you explain, for example, not having attracted enough investors, and what's been your biggest challenge so far? What's holding you off?
So I think 2 things. So first of all, we have humans in our process, and I don't apologize for that. But from a pure scalability problem, investors have raised concerns that the model isn't infinitely scalable because we have human coaches.
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Saika Bennett from Searchy. Good luck.
Hi everybody, my name is Saika Bennett and I'm the co-founder of Searchy. Are you ready for the jobs of the future? According to the World Economic Forum report, The Future of Jobs 2018, we have some major challenges to look to. One is there's new skills, so how we've hired before is no longer good for the future. There are going to be so many new things that are more important, which are personality-based and competency-based, not the traditional skills. There are over 133 million jobs between now and 2022. That's huge. That actually means we need 101 days of learning between now and then to be up to speed. One of the main goals of Searchy really is to help businesses optimize their existing culture and values and needs and the staff, and to develop them and see who they should keep and develop and mobilize, and look at the way that they can recruit and attract talent. Searchy will allow you, through artificial intelligence, to very quickly match on culture, values and needs, and skills. We have an in-house psychologist who's doing a PhD from Cambridge University, who's studying AI and human behavior and psychology, who makes sure that the data is interpreted in a user-friendly way so you as an employer can see all the data and the recorded interviews and see who you want to meet face-to-face. It's all in-house tech, so we have an in-house team, nothing's outsourced. And we're making sure that deep machine learning bit is continually being evaluated. We also address gender and inclusiveness. These, again, are two big topics right now. Diversity is a big thing right now, but if you don't change anything, nothing's going to happen. So we really can help you address this. And how to include a more inclusive way. So as the world is moving forward, we can actually include people being freelance recruiters all over the world. So the fourth industrial revolution is allowing us to work and live in new ways. We have over 60 clients right now. These are some of them. We're super excited to be in Bahrain, so thank you for welcoming us here. We're a global business. And yes, we do have competition in parts of what we do. We have traditional assessments, we have great video platforms out there. We are trying to combine everything in one to do with HR, and recruitment is just one place where we would like to start with, because we want to help you source, screen, assess, and then decide who you want to meet in person. So our competition is more reactive, where we're actually seeking passive talent. We also offer a SaaS model. So again, this can be plug and play, and you can start using it from tomorrow in your companies. So let's prepare for the future together. It's a collaborative effort. I know there's a lot of companies out there are really looking to transform the way they hire. Searchy can partner with you and give you the solutions through AI, and humans and people are absolutely at the core of our solution. And here's our team. We like to have fun, and we'd love to build businesses who have happy people, because ultimately, if you have a happy person and you have a good culture, guess what? Your business is going to be the best in the world. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. From my experience, as I worked to enhance one internal personality assessment for one of the companies in Bahrain, and we compare it directly with Thomas test. I'm sure you should know about the Thomas personality assessment. So my question is, one of the main limitation with all these personality assessments is understanding the cultures. We have multicultural, and if you will consider it as you will consider your profile, the outcome profile from the 14th personality or whatever, still we will have a gap, because, for example, in the Arabic region and for the Muslim region, sometimes they suggest some of the jobs which is not really match the cultural and the religious things. So how you will keep sure that you are controlling the multicultural thing?
Yeah. No, good question. And the parameters are not set by us. We are not here to tell you who is the best candidate in our view. We actually ask the employers, right? And we look at behaviors. How should they behave in the environment? How should their emotions be? And we work with you on this. So we're not framing it, and it's benchmarked on the ocean. You know, the ocean framework, right? Which is, we all have these big 5 personality traits. What makes us unique is we have different variations. So we're matching back on the information from the employer on the culture, right? So when we're talking about culture, we're talking about how should they be acting and behaving in the organization. And we can only do this with a multiple choice question answers which are coming from the employer. And we have descriptions which give you an overview. If someone's not sure what does assertive mean, what do I mean by sociability and emotions, there's short descriptions as well.
how do you make sure that your product is defensible? Because there are elements in your products that other people are doing, and the value proposition that you're adding is that it just gathers all the features in one platform. So how do you make sure it's defensible?
Yeah. So some of the competition that is out there right now, I've hired for years. In big corporates, I've also built 3 startups, and each time when it comes to finding people, I've tried the solutions. I find them a little bit too off the shelf, like they're very generic. I have to pick the questions, and then the video interview is normally quite just tell me about yourself. Then I have to use another service to get assessments, which cost me $300 to $500 depending on the level of hire. Then I have to maybe use recruitment agencies for something else. So I feel like I have to go to so many different places. Now, if a solution out there existed, I probably wouldn't even be standing in front of you today because I probably would have used them myself. So I think the beauty and the secret of this is let's look at solving a very real problem, which is let's just get the pile of CVs more digitized and into the best match candidates. Because we all know as candidates as well, maybe our CV hasn't even been shown. We need to get away from matching a piece of paper with a matching piece of paper. And what's out there at the moment, yeah, like I say, there's companies that are doing pieces of it, but not in one place. And we can do so much more. Like we can do appraisals, we can do L&D, we can partner with other firms. So.
Okay, thank you. I just time for one more question. Yeah. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the team. Obviously, if you're talking about scaling, you're going to have to scale that team, and you're talking about a very human-dependent business at the moment. How will that scale?
Sure. So we're a year old today, so I'm really happy to be here. It's quite a nice day, and we have 10 people right now. All the tech is in-house. We've just closed a round of funding as well, and so that's going to really enable us to scale quite fast. So we already have the list of hires that we'd like. We've got people approaching us as well who want to join us. So my background is recruitment, so I really hope that through our platform, I'm using it for all of our hires. Right? So I'm not even having to interview them because I just send out the links, they do the interviews, and then I assess who's the best and invite them in. 2 people, done. I'll make an offer to 1. And I'll tell you in a year's time if that was a good decision or not, because the next thing is we need to measure the success, so I'll be able to let you know about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have Hana Atrif from Darasni.
Hello, everybody. Does this work? Hello. Hi, this is my first pitch for Darasni, actually. And so I'm here to tell you about the company and how we're doing and how we're actually affecting Bahrain. So number 1, we have the first problem. And the first problem is the parents who find it very difficult to find a teacher or a tutor for their kids. And we're talking about home tuitions here, not online learning. And so they're also finding it very difficult to find teachers for themselves. So whether they're looking for a personal trainer, a martial arts instructor, a musician, a piano lesson, and so on, it's very difficult in Bahrain at the moment to find these sorts of teachers. The other problem that we're having right now is that there are also teachers and coaches in Bahrain that are not utilizing their capabilities. So there are certified teachers and coaches out there that are sitting at home and don't find jobs. So of course, we want to find a solution for these 2 problems. And the solution here is Darasni, which is the marketplace for teachers and coaches to advertise their services in Bahrain and basically be able to use their services more often. Now, there's a couple of key figures at the moment, and number 1 is the size of the private tuition market, which is 227 billion, and hopefully Darasni will be able to get a piece of that pie. There's also an increase in education expenditure worldwide, and there's a shortage of teaching staff in schools and colleges. Now, how it works, the system that we've built actually has a free registration for users and coaches. We have a simple search feature. So basically, if you're looking for a particular teacher or coach in Bahrain, you'll be able to simplify that very quickly with our simple search features. We have access to calendars. So not only will you be able to find out, you know, a teacher or a coach that's right for you, but you'll also be able to find out when they are available in Bahrain. There's also secure, we can't go back, there's also secure payments, and basically so you can find, book, and pay for your session in advance. Taban, here is an extract of our website. So you can see our website and the search features here. You can use the select subject as a mandatory field, and if you want to filter it even further and request, say, a female or a male teacher, you can do that. We have, at the moment, we've only been operational by the end of October. So the last day of October was the first day we actually made the website live. And we actually got two bookings on that day. So actually, where are we going? Here we go. So we got 2 bookings on that day. We also have 70 clients so far, and they're regularly booking sessions with tutors for their kids or for themselves. Here's an extract. We also have a screenshot of our Google Play and our iOS. This is sort of what they look like. You have a list of all the teachers that are available on the platform, and then you can use our search criteria to filter that even further, and then you can also book now straight away. Now the perks of Darasni. Number 1, it's the simple search feature you can see here, again, which has the select subject field, and then the rest are non-mandatory, but you can use that to filter further. And then you also have their calendars of their availability to see exactly when you can book them. And then you have an integrated and secure payment. Here's a graph of our early traction. As you can see, the slope is going up, and that's always a good sign. And also, if you've noticed, the last month is actually March, and that's this month, and we haven't even started yet. So we actually have half of the bookings that we had for February in March as of today. Now, you'd want to ask yourself what happened in the last few months to actually get that graph to go up. Now, you can see in November, December, we relaunched the website. In February, we had Google Play. We launched it on Google Play. And then, obviously, on this month, which is March, right at the end, you can see we are launching our iOS, and we're launching the entire platform in Arabic. Now, these are our milestones, as we've covered for the past couple of months. We started off in October, and we attracted 50 tutors, which is what we wanted to do. As of now, as you can see, we're more than 90 tutors, so we're doing much better than we thought we would do. Then, in November, we've launched the websites. In February, we've launched the Android. March, we are working on the Arabic development. It's actually in testing, so it's nearly ready. It should be ready about next week, and we're also launching the iOS app. Then, okay, so the next couple of months are going to be heavy marketing for us. It's gone. Heavy marketing for us. So we're going to reach hopefully 1,000 bookings in October. In January, we're launching in Saudi Arabia, and we're having a further GCC expansion within a year. These are the competitors. This is the team.
Thank you.
We don't have very many people, and we're done. So we do all these things here, and that's it for me. Any questions? Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Hi. Here. Hello. So we skipped the slide about your competition, so maybe if we can just quickly go through it.
I can go back a little bit.
I'm guessing your main competitor here is still the likes of Facebook and social media, because such services, we look for them there and we see who our closest circle are recommending, etc. How are you looking into overcoming this? Plus, I have another question. How do you control the quality of the tutors and the service providers? Because one mistake or one bad tutor can like word of mouth can go quickly, yes, and you could lose a lot. Yes.
Okay, the first question was a very good question, actually, because there are directories, right? There are directories of people offering their services on Moms in Bahrain, expatriates.com, but the problem is sifting through that data is not the best. They don't keep their data up to date. You would have to actually call every single tutor on there that you find to ask about to see if they can fulfill your requirements. correct? So the reason why I started this website actually is because I'm a mother myself. And I was looking for a French tutor for my daughter, and it took me 4 to 5 days to sift through all those data in Facebook and Instagram, on Moms in Bahrain and expatriates.com. All of those, I had a whole database of teachers, and out of which only 2 of them, after 4.5, 5 days, were willing to come to the house to do a personal, one-to-one tuition for my daughter who's 7. So that was one of the reasons why I started, and I realized that out there the information is all outdated. We need to get something that's more up to date, and that we can access schedules and make bookings directly. Now, the second question was actually also a very good question, and it was about validating the data on each tutor. So if I could go back just a little bit, I'm not sure if I will be able to in the time that I have, but we have something called the certified stamp. So anybody can actually come and be a tutor on Darasni if they have the credentials, obviously a certification, either a teaching certificate, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, but they have to have some sort of certification to be able to join the site. And we do background checks on people. We see their CVs, we have access to their passport copy, their CPR copy, and any certifications. So if we get all of these issues, all of these things, actually, this wasn't here, but you should be able to see a certified stamp on the ones that were certified by us. So we make sure that we have all the data, and if we don't, you'll be able to see it right from the get-go and not book that person if you're uncomfortable with them.
Yeah. Okay, did you involve the Ministry of Education in this? Because as you know, like especially in Bahrain, we are suffering from the fake certifications. So how you control this? And it is necessary to have the Ministry of Education to at least audit who will be involved. This is the future of our learning. So how you...
Absolutely. Okay, that number one, the Ministry of Education actually are not policing this industry yet, right? But that given, my full-time job is actually working for a semi-government government institution. So before I even started this project, I went and did my research. I went and I sat with the educational specialists, figured out what is legal and what is not, and we made sure that we followed the rules that was set up for the license that I was getting. So there's 2 rules, actually, main ones that we have to follow by doing this. Number 1 is that we can't have the teacher host any students in their home. That's a complete no-no in terms of the Ministry of Education. Then number 2 is that the teachers, no matter what course they give the student, are not entitled to give any kind of certification to that student. So as long as we follow these 2 rules, we should be in line with all the ministries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, so we're gonna need 2 minutes for the judges to deliberate on the winners, and then we're gonna announce the winners. So please keep in touch. Please welcome the judging panel. So they will announce the winners.
Okay, so there was much to deliberate after the 4 fantastic presentations that we've just had. We're very interested in fighting out about who comes second and third, but what you guys are interested in, of course, is who comes first. So we'd like to invite Experience Accelerator back onto the stage as the winner of the Female Founders Challenge. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And then I think we just put the cameras. Middle? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, just to mention, we have some Platform Labs demo day, starting networking at 6:30. So if you'd like to hang around, I was almost finished. If you'd like to hang around, there'll be networking at 6:30, and then we'll be starting about 7 o'clock in here. I believe there's about 8 pitches, so please do stay around for that. Thank you. And don't forget to come back for day 2 tomorrow morning. You can get in here from as early as 8 a.m. So please do use your delegate passes there, applicable for both days. Thank you.